council members
Estamos
to have
esperando
10
a
or
3
2/3 of our
concejales
15
más para
members, which
poder tener
constitutes a
2
quorum.
tercios para
We ask Councilmember Tony Cardenas, Councilmember Janice Hahn, Councilmember Jose Huizar, Councilmember Ed Reyes, Councilmember Greg Smith, Councilmember Jack Weiss, and Councilmember Herb Wesson to join us as soon as possible pursuant to council rules. And as soon as 3 members are here, we will begin the proceedings of this meeting. Thank you to the members of the public who are here for your patience, and for our viewers. We hope to resume the meeting shortly. Councilmember Smith for joining us. So we're still awaiting Councilmembers Cardenas, Hahn, Huizar, Reyes, Weiss, and Wesson. As soon as we have 2 more members, we will begin. Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We are awaiting 1 more member, Mr. Cardenas, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Huizar, Mr. Reyes, and Mr. Wesson. As soon as we have one of those members, we will begin. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Cardenas, Gruel, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Padilla, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
Ms. Gruel moves and Mr. Smith seconds. If there's no objection, those minutes will be approved. Next order, please.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Zine moves and Mr. Wesson seconds. If there's no objection, those commendatory resolutions will be approved as well. Next order.
And Mr. President, this is Tuesday and there is a flag salute.
Okay. Mr. Cardenas, would you be kind enough to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? If I can ask everybody in council chambers to please rise for our National Pledge of Allegiance.
Put your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cardenas. Professor Cardenas, we appreciate it. Next order of business, please.
Mr. President, do you wish to take up public comment at this time?
Let us take our general public comment right now. I'd like to ask Brett Cook to come forward as our first speaker, and then Oscar Johnson will be after him. Welcome, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Brett Cook, and I'm a resident and homeowner of Echo Park area. And I'd like to briefly relate to you, the members of this council, my recent experience dealing with a proposed development next to my house. It began the morning of November 8th. I was ending an early morning walk, taking an alternate route home when I took notice of a posted sign notifying residents in the area of a variance hearing that morning at 10:30 a.m. I immediately contacted 2 of my neighbors, both of which had not been notified. And fortunately, one of my neighbors made it to the hearing, and his attendance got a 2-week postponement of the decision. The proposed development in question has over 8 variance requests. This proposed development is to be 3 stories tall on a 30-foot frontage. This proposed house will dwarf my house by more than 30 feet, along with a retaining wall outside my kitchen door that's to be over 7 feet tall. I could go on and on about how these variances would have detrimental effects on not only my house, but the neighborhood as a whole. But what I find equally disturbing is the way the city zoning administration failed to make sure we, the neighbors, were notified. The sign I had taken notice of that morning was at the end of a cul-de-sac, the furthest away they could find a post. In my subsequent dealing with the zoning commission, it has become apparent that the zoning administrator has an open line of communication with the architect. However, when dealing with the neighbors, she has been completely unresponsive to our inquiries. This appearance of favoritism gives us the feeling that this project was being fast-tracked and we were getting railroaded. This could all be avoided if the proper safeguards were taken to ensure that the people in the community have their chance to be heard. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. I know Jane Berner in my office has been in contact, and we'll make sure that that is not the case, that we have all the due process that you deserve. So appreciate you coming in
Thank you
and
very
bringing that
much,
to our attention.
council
Thank you. Oscar Johnson is our next speaker. And then Sylvia Hawkins will follow Mr. Johnson, and then Candido Maris.
Good morning, Councilman.
Good morning.
Yeah, my name is Oscar Johnson, and I'm an active for the homeless on Skid Row. I think it's long time overdue for the African American to clean up Skid Row. Majority of the people who live on Skid Row is 90% African American, and their involvement is very corrupt activity and very destructive. I've seen people come from different nursing homes, I think, and been dumped on the streets of Skid Row in Los Angeles, California. Nothing has been did about it. And we got that thing what they call the district safety, security. I think that organization should be dismantled because they only have harassed black people. They have no authority over other people, and I don't know who grant them authority because I asked for one person identification and they couldn't show me identification, and I feel like they're imposters and that's fraud. And there is fraud in the workplace, and that's against the law. And we need an investigation on it. And we have a restaurant called that Pete Restaurant on 4th and Main. It had taken away the sidewalk from the public. They have extended their tables and their chairs all the way out in the street. And you almost got to walk in the street. I don't know if there's a boundary or there's a limitation how far they can extend, but I think they're exceeding it. And I think something should be did about it, and you got bad police enforcement on Skid Row. It seems like the people on Skid Row and the police department got a cahoots going together, and it's very illegal and un-American.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Our next speaker is Sylvia Hawkins, and then Candido Maris will be the speaker after that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ms. Sylvia Hawkins. At this time, I'd just like to let everyone that is a doer of the Bible, of the Holy Bible, must be aware of what is going on, which is dealing with all grocery store areas, collecting Red Cross or charity funds that is dealing with pans of collection and what they are doing to all of the collection plates. To give back to our churches in any area to bomb under that is dealing with any district of any righteous or honest people. Again, these that are collecting these things are not doing it for right purposes. We must also be aware of any relative name that they are dealing with now is dealing with churches, friends, family members from any city or state. These churches are only looking for excellent last names. They have good standings and good stability with the IRS to use their names only to cut on all gas, light, water, which is dealing with business owners who has been beat by con artists of the public people. Again, we must be aware that these church owners who is resigning has no good name, so they must find a relative name, last name, to cut on their light and gas. They are not paying their rent or bills. Therefore, they need gas and light. That is why blackouts is happening everywhere. So I'm warning Department of Water and Power, as the blackouts come, no invoice is being sent back out to cut the lights on, now pay their bills. They want another person's last name that has a good last name. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Our next speaker is Candido Maris.
Good morning, Mr. President, council members. Councilman Greg Smith, your friends in the rest of the valley support you in trying to stop a school and putting a much-needed hospital in Granada Hills. Your friends from the Knights of Columbus, the Wiseman, and other groups throughout the valley will support you, sir. You're always doing the best things for your constituents. In regards to the other article, Fire Chief feels heat. For 2.5 years, I've come here with workers from DWP asking for you to please to intervene and to help them to stop the retaliation that takes place at DWP. In 2004, there was over 1,100 cases that were reported, most of them with DWP against minorities, and yet nothing was done. In January, over 60 workers went before the commission, and they were listened to, but nothing has taken place. If you had 60 people from your districts come to you and complain about an issue, you would call it a red alert. 60 people within the department have gone forth. Discrimination and retaliation continues at DWP, and it's time to ask Mr. Deaton to step down. It's time for a change at DWP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Gloria Madrid, Agar Madrid. Welcome back. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Wise, Mr. Garcetti, Mr. Wesson, Mr. Parks. I'm back here after 5 years to thank you. 5 years ago, you guys, on an emergency session, issued a reward for the people that killed my son, Diedrich Egger. As I stated, it's been 5 years, and I stand before you to thank you, and especially Mrs. Perry, to see that she walked in, that she gave us the time, she gave us everything that was within her office to find out who killed my son at that time, which I just didn't know what I would do or anything. But to understand the purpose of having someone that represents your area, and to have someone like Jan Perry that stood out, that came and gave my husband the time, not that she could do to bring him back or anything, but to let us know that she did everything to work within the community, the police commission, and especially through your offices that was done. At that time, Bernard Parks was police chief, and I also want to thank him that what he said, he did, and he followed through even after his retirement and everything to make sure this was done. And I just stand before you today to say thank you to all the commissioners and especially to Mrs. Perry for all that you've done, because I do now know, and it has been done, who killed my son. And so rewards do work that come before this office. Thank you very much. And also, Mrs. Hahn, I remember you. Thank you very, very much for everything. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We're so deeply sorry about your loss again, but thank you so much for coming back here today. We appreciate it. Our next speaker is out in the San Fernando Valley in Van Nuys. Sharon Brewer will be our next speaker. Ms. Brewer? Welcome.
I'm really speaking on item number 1.
Okay, well, you want me to hold your card for item 1?
Please.
Okay, I'll do that. No problem. We'll come back to
Thank
you. Is on the just general comments, or was it for or against? Either way? We'll get in contact. Was it for or against, or just general comments?
Comment.
Okay.
General comment, please.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Chuck Tenon is our next speaker for general public comments.
Good morning, council members. Chuck Tenon, Valley Village. On the issue of the vacancy rate being very low in the city, I have here the 9 and 20 solution. In 1987, when rents were $300, you got $2,000 relocation. Now the rent's 5 times as much, and you get $3,450. There needs to be better tenant protection measures for relocation and being displaced. And this 9 and 20 is $9,000 for tenants and $20,000 for seniors and disabled. That reflects 2006 standards and prices. And if you try and relocate on $3,400, that's a real tough issue. And I think there should be something that, a motion that goes in, maybe on the 9 and 20, it justifies it, and I think this is something that should be looked at because the problem gets worse, it doesn't get better, and tenants do get displaced. They are part of the environment. They do deserve protection rights for relocation, and I think they need to look at this and do this, and also the 12.95.2 should be enforced. Both conversions and demolitions, one class of people, they're both the same thing. They're Ellis Act evicted and they're displaced. And they need to put that into one and enforce it and make things better, smooth out the rough edges, and do things to cushion it so the problem doesn't get worse, so it works out for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tenen. That closes our general public comment. Let's run through the agenda.
First item on the agenda, Mr. President, is item number 1, and that is the mayor's veto message, and I believe there are cards on this item
There
also.
are cards. We will call that special. Next items, please.
Next item is item number 2, and it's a public hearing item. It's an ordinance amending the municipal code and the ad code.
Okay. Anybody wishing to call that special? We'll open and close public comment on that. If nobody wishes to call that special, let's open the roll on item 2, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Next item is item 3, and that is also a public hearing item. It's a street lighting district ordinance.
Okay. Anybody wishing to call that special? We will open and close the public hearing on that. If not, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Number 3 is approved as well. Next items, please.
Next items 4 through 11 are also public hearing items, and the recommendation for council action is to open the hearing and to continue the hearings and ordinances to December 19th.
Okay, let's go ahead and open the public hearing on items 4 through 11. And if there's no objection, we will continue those ordinances until the 19th of December. Next items, please.
Next items are 12 through 16. Those are confirmations of building and safety liens.
Okay. We have cards, sorry, it was 12 through, which one?
12 through 16.
Okay. We'll open and close those public hearings. I don't see any cards on those. Anybody wishing to call any of them special from the council? Seeing none, let's take those up together. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. Next item, please.
And number 17 is also a lien, and the recommendation from the department is to receive and file that inasmuch as the lien has been paid.
Okay. There's no objection. Let's open the roll on receiving and filing, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
That will be received and filed. Next items, please.
Next items are items for which public hearings have been held, items 18 through 38. Item number 18 is a commissioner, and a committee report has been submitted to the council recommending approval.
Okay, let's hold 18 on the desk. Specials, Ms. Gruhl?
If I could, Mr. President, I know we have some cards on item 19.
Okay.
If we could open a public hearing on item 19, call that special.
All right. Call that special for Ms. Gruhl. Other specials, Ms. Hahn?
20.
20 for Ms. Hahn. Mr. Parks?
28.
28 for Mr. Parks. Mr. Rosendahl?
37, we'd like to remove it from the agenda. It's still in committee.
Okay. Send that to which committee? Oh, it's still in committee, or you'd like to send it to committee?
No, it is still in
Okay,
committee.
so we'll just move to withdraw that from the agenda. Any other specials, colleagues? Seeing none, let's open the roll on the ballot. Oh, sorry, Ms. Perry.
33 needs to be referred back to Energy and Environment Committee.
E2 for 33?
Yes.
Got it. All right. Let's open the roll on those actions, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved, withdrawn, and referred. Next items, please.
Next items are items for which public hearings have not been held, items 39 through 49. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay. We'll open and close the public hearings on those. We don't have any cards. Any specials? Mr. Rosendahl?
Mr. Reyes would like me to continue that until Friday.
Okay. If there's no objection, that will be till the 1st of December. Ms. Perry?
43.
43 for Ms. Perry. Mr. Labange, did you have one?
Substitute motion 42.
Okay. No other specials. Let's open the roll.
Excuse me, Mr. President, I understand on item 42A, I believe there's a substitute motion that has not been distributed as yet.
Okay, let's hold that so we can get the substitute motion on that. And on the balance, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Next items on the supplemental agenda, 50 through 57, are items for which public hearings have been held. Item number 50, a committee report has been submitted and distributed to the
Okay,
council.
Let's call that special. I'll do that. Other specials, colleagues? 50 through 57, Mr. Parks.
On 57, move the Budget and Finance report.
Okay, Mr. Parks moves the Budget and Finance report. I'll second that. Any other specials? If not, let's open the roll on 51 through 57, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Next items are 58 and 59, and those are items for which public hearings have not been held.
Okay, I don't see any cards on that, so we'll open and close the public hearing on 58 and 59. Anybody wishing to call those special from the council? If not, let's open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
Those are approved. Next items?
Items 60 through 62 are closed sessions. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes, please, let's hold those on the desk.
And that would take council back to the items called special. Do you wish to take the commissioner up first?
Before that, I'd like to recognize Mr. Labange for introduction of a very important guest. Mr. Labange.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members, and our guests in council chambers this morning. From our sister city of Mumbai, India, we have a very special artist, really, who is a director of film. He's here in Los Angeles as he awaits his entry of a Academy Award for Best Foreign Picture. Please welcome Rakesh O'Mara, right here from India, over 150 features, television. His award-winning film, Rang de Batista, is India's official entry into the Academy Awards for Best Foreign Picture. And a very special person who's with us, a very humble man. It's great to have you here. You're escorted by the great Mira Honeycutt. Please stand and be raised, the head of the Los Angeles Mumbai sister city. And you know, Mr. President, as the key representative of Hollywood, how important film is to the world. And it's we're great to have you here and all. Welcome to Los Angeles.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor to have Bollywood here in Hollywood. It should be actually, instead of Mumbai, Los Angeles, probably Bollywood, Hollywood Sister City Association, but we really appreciate you being here, and thank you for gracing us with your presence. With that, we will return to the items called special, and the first item, colleagues, is item number 1, and we do have the mayor's veto before us, and we have public speaker cards. I'd like to open our public comment, 2 minutes per speaker, beginning with Mr. Tenny Pierce. If you just come to the podium, sir, over there. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and Council. I'm just here today to clear up my name and clear up some facts that's been brought before the City of Los Angeles. First of all, I just want to tell you about myself. I was raised in the City of Los Angeles for 30 years. I went here to Santa Barbara Elementary, Fauché Junior High, Crenshaw High School. I've always respected this city, and one of my dreams was to become a fireman. I went to Cal State Northridge, and then I went on for a short term to play football. But this city has always been my home, and I've always respected it. I've been with LAFD now for approximately 19 years. And yes, we do have what we call hazing, and we do have what you call pranks. But there is a certain level that you have to go to and a certain level that has to be stopped. I was involved in those pictures. I do not deny it. So were many others involved in those pictures. But those pictures were done in love to guys who were promoted, to guys who had a long stint with the fire department of 29, 30 years, who were getting ready to retire. And we did it in love. When I first came on as a rookie, I always wondered why were they doing this thing? But after seeing what they were doing, I saw it was in love, because after it was over, everyone would hug the person, everyone would stand up, take pictures with the person, and, wish him well on his new life. What they did to me at Fire Station 5 was wrong because it was something that I did not know. My mother worked 3 jobs to get me where I'm at today, and at no time did my mother ever feed us dog food. No matter how tight, no matter how it hurt, she put in her time that we didn't have to eat dog food. And I took great offense when 9 white members sat in the kitchen, watched me eat it. Not one word was said. Guys laughing, guys doing all these things, and it hurt me very much.
Excuse me 1 second, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Parks? Yep.
We suspend the rules because I think some of these comments may be just a little longer than the 2 minutes.
We generally give 2 minutes per speaker, but there's been a motion to suspend those rules, colleagues, to go further. If there's a second on that, if there's no objection.
Thank you.
None seen, please continue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks.
This whole thing could have been alleviated at the highest level. I asked for help. I did not get help. All I asked for when Chief Coleman called me, investigation, psychological help, and to punish the guys who did this. I kept my cool in the station. Could have went off, but I did what was right. And the city did not step up. They didn't step up. Bring in the advocates, investigate. We wouldn't be here today. We would not be here today if the advocates would have came in. They turned the advocates away. Once they transferred me to Fire Station 63, I was good. I'm feeling all right. I'm coming back to myself. Then a captain comes up to me and tells me, next week, when you come back off your 4-day, you're at the pool position. The pool position is a position where they have an extra fireman at a station, and if someone in your battalion gets sick, they send an extra man there. He tells me, we're sending you back to Fire Station 5. Come on, I'm a grown man. Do you want me to go there and end up in jail? I asked for help. I talked to the gentleman, the captain, I said, Cap, don't send me there. His words to me were, if you're back to work, you can work as any other fireman. No matter what anybody says about me, I've always tried to do what's right. This was wrong. And if 4 black firemen did it to a white fireman, I would stand up for the white fireman and say, it's wrong. Because that's the kind of person I am. I've been ridiculed, a reporter standing outside of my house, knocking on my door, my 13-year-old daughter coming home, running to the neighbor's house scared. It's wrong. And if the city council and whoever voted against me would bring their family and their granddaughter and their kids to a fire station and let a fireman give their granddaughter a bowl of spaghetti with cooked dog food on it, he or she may not feel bad about it, but I wonder what that wife would do when she sees that it was her daughter that this fireman gave dog food to. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make reform. Yeah, people play jokes, yeah, people play pranks, but you have to stand up for when you do something wrong. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. The captains never stood up and told me. If they would have said right there in the kitchen, in the office, hey, I put it in your food, I'm sorry, I'd have washed it clean. But they didn't. If they would have just stood up, that's all I asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Our next speaker is Reginald Harbour. And after that will be Arnett Hartsfield. Welcome, sir.
I'm a friend of Tenny's, and I've been Tenny's friend for the last 10 years. I'd like to speak to the council as a friend of Tenny's on his character. This is the man who's committed to his family, his wife Brenda and his children. He is truly, truly supportive of. He's committed to his profession. It takes a special person to become a firefighter, and we know that it is a very dangerous job, and this man risked his life for the last 20 years to protect us in the city of Los Angeles. He's committed to his friends. He's the kind of individual that you can call on at any point in time, and he will be there for you in any way or need that you may have of him. And I appreciate that in him. He's committed to his community, and you can see his community is committed to him because we are here standing behind him because we know what kind of person that he is. He's a genuine person, very loyal, but he's a very giving person. As you can see, Tenny is a big man, 6'5", 280 pounds, and he has a big heart, bigger than you would expect. This man gives in so many different ways, and I'm just proud to say that I'm his friend, to represent him here today as a character witness for his commitment to his family, to his profession, to his friends, and to his community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Arnett Hartsfield, and then after that will be Jamal Watkins.
Members of the council, I'm here to give a brief Racism 101. It seems to me that the issue of racism is a very difficult one. Racism is calculated to avoid detection, and yet we are always asked to prove it. Anyone that lives in America, and you ask him if there's any racism in his attitude, it's like asking a fish, is he wet? And I've been here for 88 years, and I've suffered it in various forms, but I've never been able to prove it to the people that imposed it. As a brief example, I was told when I was a sophomore at UCLA that the fire department wasn't going to hire me because I was overqualified. 15 years later, when I was supposed to be integrated and was really isolated, I had gained, it was no longer a sophomore, I had 2 degrees, both from USC. I had passed the bar. I had served my country for 3 years as an officer in World War II. I'd been awarded the Bronze Star Medal. When I reported to my, quote, integrated fire station, I was told not to come in the kitchen when the white firemen were eating. I am not claiming that racism is the only issue, but I spent 20 years in the department, and I know that there is racism there, for I experienced it. It's a great department. That's why I wanted to be a full-fledged member, and I tried as hard as I could to live up to that point. Racism is in this society.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Jamal Watkins, our next speaker, and then Dr. Lewis King after that.
To President Garcetti and other distinguished council members, my name is Jamal Watkins, Western Region Director of the NAACP. I stand before you on behalf of the National Board of the Advancement of Colored People, President and CEO Bruce S. Gordon, and Chairman Julian Bond. We are here because we are faced with a serious issue that is a lot larger than Mr. Pierce, a serious issue as it relates to the failure of a fire department over the last 10 years. And so on behalf of the association, you have local, state, and national representation. And we will first hear from Dr. Geraldine Washington, who is the president of the Los Angeles branch of the NAACP.
Good morning. I need to tell you that as I was dressing this morning to come, I had a few flashbacks. Those flashbacks were part of my growing up and going to school in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I said then to myself, maybe I could expect something like this in Little Rock, Arkansas, but that's why I left. So I am really concerned, and I am glad to see that we have other people supporting us over the settlement, over all of the, Mr. Has gone through, Mr. Pierce. So to understand the importance of this settlement, one must understand the long history of negative images that have been fostered about African Americans for centuries. We have always been looked upon as less than human, and some would place their dogs ahead of us. So now for a white person or a group of whites to intentionally place dog food in the food of an African American and later taunt him about it reinforces negative, condescending attitudes of some that African Americans are less than human and dog food is okay for them to eat. Coupled with this, the perpetrators do not think they did anything wrong. It was just a joke. It was all in fun. And this compounds the problem, because when we cease to recognize each other or other people as human, then anything is okay. We can do anything, we can say anything, and have no regard for the individual or the individuals. So just remember that. The perpetrators do not think there was anything wrong. So this settlement, while it is high, is just, and it sends a message that racial harassment will not be tolerated by Los Angeles, Los Angelinas, and by the fire department. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. Dr. Lewis King is our next speaker, and then Earl Afari Hutchinson.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the Council. I speak here as a scholar in residence of the Bradley Foundation and professor of human development at UCLA. I've studied racism and its impact for over 32 years. I begin with some words from Fanon, who reminded us that exploitation of man by man must cease, and that it is possible to love and honor humans wherever they might be. I make 3 points. Point number 1, Mr. Pierce has suffered a crime against humanity. He was dehumanized in the service of control and discipline. He was reduced to a thing, the destructive irrationality at the heart of racism. The veto has the effect of making the victim of racism a co-conspirator in his own dehumanization. He went to the well to drink, poison was put in his water, but only when he drank. Now we claim it was his fault because he came to the well as a willing participant. To relabel this action as hazing is to accuse the children of the failing schools of LA as co-conspirators in their own destruction. Hazing is an attempt to include someone through an initiation process. Racism is an attempt to exclude. This was racism. Point number 2, one meaning of racism is discriminatory or abusive behaviors towards members of another race.
Sir, if I can
By this
respectfully
standard-
ask you to conclude. We have to do 2 minutes per speaker, but if there's additional comments, we'd be happy to read them as well, that you can give to the Sergeant at Arms. But if I can ask you to conclude, please.
The major point I wanted to establish is racism against African Americans persists in the form of police brutality, inferior education systems, to name a few. But the most grievous of the lot is being singled out for political abuse, as we are today, because those in power see us as weak as an inferior.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Earl Afari Hutchinson. And if you'd like to, sir, give those comments, we can have them from the Sergeant at Arms.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti and honorable city council members. I circulated by letter, by fax, and by email this statement to all city council members and the mayor's office, too. And essentially, I'll read it. Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa's veto of the LA City Council's $2.7 million racial discrimination settlement with black firefighter Tenny Pierce makes no sense. The mayor buckled to pressure from ill-informed and ratings-driven public hysteria pressure from radio shock jocks. I hope public policy is not made in this city by radio talk show hosts. If we've come to that level, we might as well just close down city government. There's no evidence that the hazing Pierce allegedly engaged in early on in his firefighter career was racially motivated. We need to make some distinctions, and Mr. Pierce, and I'm sure other speakers will make that distinction. There's a world of difference between a firefighter being targeted for racial indignities, as Pierce was, and the routine firehouse pranks that Pierce and other firefighters allegedly engaged in. And by the way, he was very candid. He was very forthright, and he was very honest in admitting that. But there's a world of difference between hazing, the pranks that go on, there's a culture in the fire department, we all know that, it's been well documented, and being racially targeted, which Mr. Pierce was. The pattern and practice in long history, and we've heard this from firefighter Arnett Hartsfield and many others, and long history of racial discrimination and racially motivated hazing within the LA City Fire Department has been well documented. Almost needs no debate on that. Even those in the fire department at the upper echelons, top brass, have admitted that. Los Angeles City Attorney Rocky Delgadito provided you, the City Council, with the pictures of Pierce and all other relevant information in the case. The case was carefully reviewed. Settlements just don't happen, as you well know. It takes time, consideration. All the evidence must be looked at and examined. That was done. It was presented to you. So there's really no basis for overturning it. Finally, the LA City Council should reject Mayor Villaraigosa's veto and reinstate Pierce's settlement.
Thank you, sir.
Because what you do when you do that, you send a very, very strong signal, and you've heard it today and you see it behind us, that racism, discrimination, racially motivated targeting will not be tolerated in city government, city agencies, and most important, in the city fire department. One final thought.
Thank you, sir.
Hazing, we condemn it. We denounce it. We implore city agencies and the fire department to end that practice. But again, there's a world of difference and distinction between hazing, pranks, and racial discrimination.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Tenny Pierce was a victim of that. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Reverend Charles Blake. Reverend Blake? And thank you to the speakers for their understanding. The clock is there just to help folks guide the 2 minutes. And after that will be Jacqueline Hawthorne.
Good morning, members of the City Council. The battle to eradicate racism from our law enforcement and public protection departments still goes on, and we must not rest until every trace of it is eliminated. Hazing of any kind is inappropriate for the level of professionalism that we expect from our fire protection workers, whether it is race-based, rank-based, or initiation-based. The level of hazing focused on Mr. Pierce was not only excessive and inappropriate, it seemed to be unmistakably racist in nature. Dog food is for dogs. To give a man dog food is to indicate that you consider that man to be on the level of a dog. I am told that the photograph of Mr. Pierce, which seems to indicate that he initiated similar activity, was taken more than 13 years ago and was celebrating the promotion of the alleged victim to the higher rank, and was common and accepted practice at that time. In regards to this case, however, the city attorney and legal consultants brought a recommendation that a settlement approximating the amount of pension or benefit to which Mr. Pierce would have been entitled to in less than 5 years. 5 years that he would have worked if he had not been exposed to an atmosphere of ostracism and ridicule that he experienced. I stand to speak against our failure to loudly protest this incident and others of this nature that go unrecognized and unresolved. If appropriate action is not taken at this time, Mr. Pierce will proceed with a lawsuit that will cost the city hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and will succeed in getting a judgment in excess of the amount of the supposed settlement. At that point, all will agree that we have failed to make a just and economical alternative. Whatever the decision is in this particular case, let the cry go up from everyone involved that this behavior will not be tolerated in our city. God bless and good day.
Thank you very much. Jacqueline Hawthorne is next. After that will be Willis Edwards.
Good morning. I have a letter to read to the council from Reverend Jesse Jackson, founder and president of the Rainbow Push Coalition, regarding Tenny Pierce and the Los Angeles Fire Department. Dear Mayor Villaraigosa and council members, I've learned that Mayor Villaraigosa vetoed the settlement in the case of Tenny Pierce versus City of Los Angeles, and that the City Council will vote on Tuesday, November 28, about whether to override the veto. I am aware of the history of racism in the Los Angeles Fire Department, LAFD, and am very familiar with the Pierce case. As you know, beginning in 1994, again in 1995, and then twice again in 2006, the City of Los Angeles has acknowledged in the strongest possible terms that there is systemic racism and retaliation in the LAFD. Further, the city has acknowledged that victims of racism in the department often do not step forward because they are so afraid of being retaliated against. Therefore, we must all agree that the LAFD harbors an environment that is hostile to African Americans and prevents victims through threats and intimidation from speaking out about their experiences. It is only within this context that the veto of the settlement in the Pierce case can be addressed. I understand that the veto was prompted by photographs placed on a conservative radio show website, which depict Mr. Pierce engaging in horseplay approximately 14 to 16 years ago. During Mayor Villaraigosa's statement about the veto, he reiterated a zero-tolerance policy about horseplay in the LAFD. Mr. Pierce is a good man who faithfully served the citizens of the Los Angeles and the LAFD. He did not wake up and decide to play a race card. The veto of Mr. Pierce's settlement sends a message to every victim that the City of Los Angeles will not hold itself responsible for violation. The veto has let every victim in the LAFD know that the mayor's administration does not stand behind them.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have one last paragraph, if I may.
Please, just...
The veto has taught the conservative right wing that if it can successfully attack and misrepresent the character and conduct of other LAFD victims, those victims' cases will have no safe harbor in the mayor's office. Obviously, you can all expect that each of the victims who still have the courage to speak out will be subjected to vicious smears campaigns. I applaud the City Council for its prior votes to settle the Tenny Pierce case, and I encourage the City Council in the strongest possible terms to right the ship and override Mayor Villaraigosa's veto. Sincerely, Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, Sr.
Thank you, Ms. Hawthorne. Appreciate it very much. Willis Edwards is our next speaker, and then Jeannie Harrison will be after that.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to refer to Dr. King because I think his statements are so important before this council. And I think what we're talking about is a man's life. We're talking about the effects of it. And we want truly the City Council to understand that. We're asking for leadership from the City Council to protect one who comes forward, his family who comes forward. And I would like to have Dr. King finish out his point.
We don't have a practice actually of referring unless somebody moves to suspend the rules again. I'm sorry. Should we just, that's the rules that we have. So unless there's a member.
Okay, but then I'll finish what I have to say.
Suspend it. Okay. My apologies, Dr. King. Please.
I am so sorry too that we are not able to do that because I think what he has to say is very educational. He deals with it on a day-to-day basis. And I hope that you will call him in as an expert for the City of Los Angeles. On behalf of all of us who organized this day because we believe to the core that the city of Los Angeles needs to provide leadership, not going out to the press badgering someone. And I want to say something about the Ken and Bob show. They say they don't care about what happens at the fire station. They just care about if their house gets burned down, they want the firemen there. Well, I care about what happens at the fire station, Mr. Rosenthal. I care about what happens in the city of Los Angeles. I care about the racial divide in the city. And I care about all of us coming together to protect the people who really serve us. It is so important that you all provide leadership today to all of us and stop this madness, because every day there's something else coming out in the press. Now, we got some more stuff for you today. We got some more stuff for you that you will not believe is happening in your fire department. But we are here for Kenny Pierce. We have a document that's going to be read by one of the firemen today that you will understand that Mr. Pierce was not the person heading this up. Mr. Pierce was a participant, just willing participant like everyone else. I ask you, Mr. Zion, to have an open heart to listen to this and listen to us about, since everybody's gotten to go on the radio, we want to listen to us now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeannie Harrison is our next speaker, and then we'll go out to the Valley for Sharon Brewer. Please.
Hello, members. I'm Jeannie Harrison, and I represent Tenny Pierce. We all know that the Los Angeles Fire Department is in the midst of great turmoil. Your own city controller and your personnel department in 2006 have declared and found, yet again, that there is systemic racism, sexism, and retaliation in the department. 87% of African Americans who were surveyed said that they've been the subject of racism. A similarly shocking high number of women indicated that they were the subject of sexism and sexual harassment. It has taken a great deal of courage for Mr. Pierce to stand up and step forward and put himself in the line of fire, to finally put his foot down and say, these things are not right, it's not okay. And the department itself has not protected Mr. Pierce. When he asked for help in the department before he ever even considered filing a lawsuit, he asked for the department's help. It was not given to him. He was fed to the wolves, essentially. He was abandoned, and everywhere he went, he was barked at, he was ridiculed, and all of these kinds of things. Dog food was put in his truck, and this was before any complaint was filed in court. Eventually, he felt that he could no longer trust the people that he worked with. He was ostracized. He tried to come back to work 2 times. He was sent back to the fire station where this incident happened. This is evidence of a systemically wrong and sick organization and administration. And I don't need to convince you of that. Your own city structure has told me I'm right. Now, I have deposed many of the people in this case, the participants, and they have said to a person that any prank that Mr. Pierce engaged in before had absolutely nothing to do with the reason why they fed him dog food. They've all said that point blank. Management said, in its perspective, there was no relation whatsoever. It is very important. It is very important.
Mr. Weiss? Move to suspend the rules for the speaker.
My microphone on?
Yep.
I would just say that we're obviously going to be spending a great deal of time later today talking with the city attorney about the case. I think it's useful for the council, frankly, to hear more rather than less from the plaintiff's attorney.
Okay.
So I'd ask.
If there's no objection to that, that motion will extend your time. Please continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Each one of these people testified that anything Tenny Pierce did had absolutely nothing to do with the reason why they did this to him, okay? They didn't even know about the incidents 13 years ago. They had no idea. It did not enter into their conscience. The LAFD management testified that from its management perspective, anything Mr. Pierce engaged in, any kind of prank whatsoever, did not have anything to do with the reason why he was fed dog food. What else did the LAFD management say in writing and in depositions? They said that there was a collective attempt to cover up what happened to Mr. Pierce, that the captains, one of the captains bought the dog food, they knew exactly what was going on, and they allowed Mr. Pierce to eat the dog food. They did not stop him. They were fully aware, and I have been in that kitchen It is small, and it gets very, very small when all of those men were in the kitchen. The person who put the dog food in the spaghetti walked back and forth right in front of the captains. Your own Los Angeles Fire Department management concluded the captains knew everything and were covering it up. What else happened? Okay? Ultimately, the investigatory documents, the inquiry documents went forward to an African-American battalion chief whose name is Millage Peaks. He was the executive officer at the time. It went forward to him, and he wrote reports regarding the two white captains and the firefighter who put the dog food in the spaghetti. Okay. Chief Peaks was understandably concerned and dismayed when, in his deposition, he was shown two reports on the captains that had his signature signed by another chief, a white chief, that he did not know this signature was signed. These were not his original reports. The original reports have been disappeared. They were rewritten, and Millage Peaks' name was signed to the new reports on the captains without his knowledge or consent. This is the very evidence that is going to be put forward at trial. This is the reason why, one of the reasons why, the city attorney well knew it was good to recommend to you, to the citizens of Los Angeles, to get this case settled. Not only that, but Mr. Pierce has been mercilessly harassed and retaliated against. If there was any question before about his capacity to go back and work in the fire department because everybody would welcome him back as a loved and missed brother, you must know now that would never be the case. If you overturn the veto, you will tell Mr. Pierce he does not need to go back to work. If you do not overturn the veto, Mr. Pierce is faced with having to go back to work in the Los Angeles Fire Department. So that's something that needs to be considered very seriously. The individuals who engaged in this conduct against Mr. Pierce have many friends throughout the fire department, and we have to ask ourselves, why did these photographs come out? Why were they sent to this show? Why is all of this happening? I can't tell you how many people have been on the phone to me from the fire department indicating their despair because they feel very threatened by what is being done to Mr. Pierce. There are few people in the department who are willing to stand up and have the courage to try to fight for reform. And they feel that they are going to be subjected to the same targeting that Mr. Pierce has been subjected to now. It is vitally important that all of you send a message that this is not going to be allowed. I thank you.
Thank you. We'll go next to Van Nuys, to Sharon Brewer. Ms. Brewer, are you still out there in Van Nuys? Ms. Brewer, are you still out there in Van Nuys?
Yes.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sharon Brewer, and this is just basically general comment. One thing is the lawsuit was agendized November 8th, one day after the city election, with Prop R term extensions on ballot. Was this intentionally agendized for after the election? If the $2.7 million settlement is upheld, it could set a precedent for other lawsuits. What is there to stop other people involved in the pranks at the fire department or other departments from filing racial harassment lawsuits? Lawsuit dollars should be taken out of the department's budget. That way the department being sued is directly affected, more accountability. Dollar amounts of lawsuit should have to be justified. How did this amount determined? I'm a taxpayer who had nothing to do with the prank to Mr. Pierce by members of the fire department. Why should taxpayer money be used to pay lawsuits filed against departments? Hold those who are directly involved in the lawsuit accountable for their actions. The prank that happened to Mr. Pierce should not have happened, but filing a lawsuit against the taxpayers of Los Angeles is not the answer. Once again, the money needs to directly come out of the department involved. Mr. Pierce, I personally apologize for what happened to you with the dog food incident. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Patricia Balasana.
Good morning,
Good morning.
President Garcetti and council members. My name is Patricia Bellasam. I represent the Los Angeles chapter of the National Organization for Women. I'll start off by saying, because I was made a cause celebre on the John and Ken show, because they couldn't quite fathom what do women have to do with this issue. Well, women have actually heard these arguments that have been made, excusing completely mutually consensual acts that are completely irrelevant, and say because we have evidence that you've said yes before, you can never ever say no. Well, there are plenty of sexual harassment cases that are going to be coming before you, plenty of sex-based discrimination coming out of this department, the same department, and you're using the same arguments that have been made for women for centuries, that we simply cannot say no as long as you can in any way impugn our character. Not only was Tenny Pierce's character impugned in an immoral fashion, it's just plain irrelevant and will not work in court. You are going to lose, and you're going to lose big. And please just do the right thing, not the easy thing as Mayor Villaraigosa did. Do the right thing, and finally fix the city and the department. Take personal responsibility for the retaliation, fix it, and then you will not have these lawsuits ever again. But if you do not override this veto, there will be lawsuits. There will be more lawsuits and more lawsuits and more trials by juries, verdicts that are going to be mind-boggling. And then sooner or later, you're going to have to face the fact that the city, for more than 2 decades, has failed in its oversight responsibility. Finally, please take that responsibility and do the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Bellasama. Donald Jones is our next speaker. And after that will be Captain Thomas.
Good morning. My name is Donald Jones, retired from the fire department 21 years, Medal of Valor recipient, and numerous commendations. I have here before me a sworn declaration by Charlie Palacios. He's the firefighter that you've been talking about that are on those photos on that gurney. And I'm going to read that for you. It's going to take more than 2 minutes to do that, but I'll read the best I can. Charlie Palacios says in this declaration, I, Charles Palacios, declare as follows. I was employed by the Los Angeles City Fire Department from 1976 to October 2004, when I retired as a firefighter 3. I am making this declaration based on my personal knowledge, and if called to testify thereto, could and would do truthfully. This declaration is made on my own free will, and no one has coerced or manipulated my testimony. I would not lie to protect Tenny Pierce, and I would not lie for the LFD or the City of Los Angeles. I was assigned to Fire Station 61 from 1987 to 1996. I believe Tenny Pierce was assigned to Fire Station 61 during my last 4 years at the station. Firefighter Pierce was a likable person, and he and I got along well. I also got along well with the other members at Fire Station 61. There were no incidents at Fire Station 61 where the guys There were incidents at Fire Station 61 where the guys would pour condiments on one another, and when one of the members was promoted, transferred, or even when it was someone's birthday. There was an engineer at Fire Station 61 named Armando Jimenez, who is now a captain. Engineer Jimenez was the ringleader of most of the transfer promotions-related incidents at Fire Station 61 while I was there. He was the one who would gather the guys and tell them that one of these jokes was going to be played on a certain member. I'm going to skip through this a little bit. I do not remember anyone being upset.
Please continue. We have rules
I do not remember anyone being upset about the incidents. No one got up swinging or yelling, or no one reported an incident to the captains. As far as I could tell, for all the incidents I witnessed, everyone involved appeared to go along with the situations, including the guy who ended up with the condiments on him. Firefighter Pierce was not the ringleader of the transfer and promotion-related incidents at Fire Station 61. Instead, he, like almost all the other members, participated once the incident was organized by Engineer Jimenez. I know this because I witnessed Engineer Jimenez organize the jokes. Engineer Hymas was also the person who took the pictures of the incident while they were happening. When I was about to transfer out of Fire Station 61, I was very well liked and respected. At the time, I was the most senior firefighter at the station. On my last shift at Fire Station 61, the guys grabbed me, set me down on the gurney. They then strapped me onto it and acted like they were going to shave me. But they did not shave me at all. All they did was unbuckle my pants a bit and put some shaving cream on my abdominal area. Then take pictures. The whole thing was staged. Apparently, for the pictures, once Engineer Hymas got some good photos, the guys released me from the gurney and I cleaned off. They hugged me and told me they will miss me, and they wished me good luck at my new assignment. I took it for granted that Engineer Hymas organized my incident because he organized all the other ones that I observed. I have reviewed the photos posted on the John and Ken website. I am unable to identify some of the incidents. However, I am able to say the following. The incidents shown in the photos appear to be pictures of types of pranks I described at the fire station. The photos and the staging are very similar to what I experienced, both as some pranks and someone who was the subject of a prank. The photos show a firefighter acting like he is about to be shaved, to shave the person involved, who is strapped on a gurney. It appears to be photos of a transfer prank involving me. In all the years I was at Fire Station 61, including when firefighter Pierce was assigned there, I do not recall a single incident where any of us did something to anyone else maliciously. There is an unwritten rule in the fire department that you do not tamper with a person's food, and we certainly did not feed each other dog food or engage in any similar conduct. I think that feeding firefighter Pierce dog food at Fire Station 5 goes beyond all bounds of decency and camaraderie, camaraderie that I know of and experienced in my 29 years in the department. Feeding firefighter Pierce dog food without his knowledge is nothing like the good-natured promotions or transfer-related incidents members of the department have engaged in for so long. I declare under penalty and perjury, under the laws of the state of California, the foregoing is true and correct, and it's executed on the 27th day of November 2006 in Arizona. Charlie R. Palacios.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Captain Jerry Thomas is next. And after that will be Brenda Pierce.
I'm Captain Jerry Thomas. I'm a Captain 2, the highest ranking captain on LAFD. I'm still active. Things start and ends with the captains. You know, we teach rookies, and I've trained a lot of rookies over 31 years. I've been a captain for 20 years. I've trained a lot of rookies on this job, black, white, yellow, and brown. There's 3 things that we don't do on this job as a cardinal sin. You don't mess with one's food, family, and protective equipment. And you can throw politics in there because it's pretty divisive. We don't do that. You know, I spoke at the 94 hearings at great peril to my family and my career, but I did anyway because I've always been an advocate for justice. You know what? It's kind of deja vu for me because 13 years ago, I sat in front of the Public Safety Committee and told them about the systemic entrenched racism on the fire department. You know, I've lived it, experienced it, litigated it. I've sued the fire department several times. And you know what? I got to take my hat off to Arnett Hartsfield because he was a pathfinder. He did the things to get me where I am today. And it's unfortunate that a lot of African-American people in general, but don't get me wrong, it's white folks on this job want to step up, but retaliation is so entrenched that they won't do it. So, you know, it's ironic that the $2.7 million settlement will ironically bring out and open up the window about the systemic racism and the cultural racism on the fire department. But I'm asking you today, when I ask you 12, 13 years a day, step up to the plate. Some of you can talk the talk, but walk the walk now, to have a gut check. Do the right thing. If you want to talk to a subject matter expert, and I've never been asked, I've been at several council meetings, fire commission meetings. If you want to know what's going on with the fire department systemically, ask me. I've experienced it, lived it. I know the regulations and manual operations. If you really want to know the truth, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Brenda Pierce is our next speaker.
My name is Brenda Pierce. I've been married to Tenny Pierce for 16 years. I married Tenny shortly after his 6-year daughter died of a brain tumor. I fell in love with Tenny because of his honesty and his dedication. He was a very strong man. Tenny is a department man. He always is for the job, and he's identified very strongly with his job. Tenny was a fun-loving person and always the life of the party until the incident at Fire Station 5. That's when, and incident at Fire Station 5, and the fire department did not stand by him. It took a lot of courage for Tenny to stand up and report the incident. He'd never made a formal complaint against any of his fellow members until this happened to him. In my opinion, Tenny is courageous. We knew we had to take this to another level when Tenny was being harassed and being harassed and retaliated against at work. The story of this incident was everywhere. All he wanted to do was get some help from the fire department, and the department did not stand up for him. They wanted him to go back to Fire Station 5. Even our 11-year-old daughter has been to suffering behind this as well. She first became involved in the incident at school when some of the firefighter kids started teasing her for her dad eating dog food, and this was before any suit was filed. Tenny believed he had to sue the department, because of the cancer within the department. If the department had followed its own rules, we wouldn't be here today. But he did not, and Tenny felt close to hold the department accountable. This was not a popular choice, but it took a lot of courage. Because Tenny stood up for the fire department to hold accountability to the fire department, our family has suffered a lot. My husband has lost his salary, he's lost his pension, he's lost his character, he's lost his good humor, and we had to see him bend, to kneel down, to bend. He's lost his career, he's lost his dignity, and he's lost his love for his fellow firefighters. I want to address the most recent campaign against my husband. The uninformed knee-jerk reaction that has had to this case has rippled through the city. For the last 2 weeks, our daughter, who normally takes the school bus to school, our daughter has been trying to hide away from the kids at school. The kids are constantly harassing her, and on break times, she's trying to find a location where she wouldn't have to be seen by other kids to be constantly harassed. The other day, she takes the school bus to and from the school. She's on the school bus. The talk show radio had the radio turned up loud with the conversation going on, and all the kids on the school bus full of kids, 11 to 13, they were talking about her father, so she had to sit there and endure that. They were calling her father a liar, calling him a joker, calling him a crook, and many other kind of things. She called me while she was on the school bus, and she said, "Well, Mommy, what should I do?" I said, "Baby, there's nothing you can do but just pray. Just pray and try to ignore it." She's tried through this entire thing to stand strong, and for the most part, she's done a good job. We have a 20-year-old son. He told me just the other day that he's thinking about moving out of the state, but he can't tolerate the way his father's been treated. And he doesn't understand why people are so cruel to his father, when all he wanted to do was stand up for what he thought was right. So it's really becoming a hardship on our family. I ask you all, do you think this is right? They know it's not. Do you really think that nothing's happened to my husband? Are you really going to send a message to the people that it's okay to treat people in any kind of way? All he wanted the department to do was stand up and support him, and they refused to do that. I hope you make the right decision. All this man has done was just to stand up for what he thought was right. And if the city has stood up by him and followed their own rules, we wouldn't be here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pierce. Our next speaker is Nana Gyamfi. Nana Gyamfi.
Good morning.
I thought you wouldn't be able to hear me. I'm blasting the place out. My name is Nana Jumphy. I'm a co-director of an organization called Human Rights Advocacy. I'm also an attorney, and I represent other firefighters that have filed lawsuits or in the process of filing lawsuits against the City of Los Angeles Fire Department for discrimination, failure to prevent discrimination. So I wear two hats this morning. This is a critical moment in the history of race relations in this city. Your decision with regard to this settlement will decide whether Los Angeles is a city that represents the civil rights and human dignity of all of its citizens and employees, or whether we've gone back to a time when a black man has no rights that a white man need respect. We are aware that the decision to affirm the settlement is a difficult one to make, though just and justifiable. We've heard reports that you have received proverbial burning crosses in the form of hate email and dog food symbolically lit at your office doors. And we understand that in the face of that, it may be difficult to do the right thing, but we urge you to find the strength to do the right thing again, even in the face of the angry white throng. Institutional racism exists within LAFD. The audits of 2006 from the Personnel and Controller's Office make it plain. If you look at the surveys and audits from 1991, 1992, and 1994, it is plain. If you look at the consent decree and the paperwork that resulted in that in 1974, it is plain. The desegregation paperwork from 1954, it is plain. The complaints and the comments that have been made by black firefighters since black firefighters have been with the department, it is plain. The type of discrimination suffered by firefighter Pierce and by other firefighters that have filed complaints against the city in this case are typical of the discrimination that is suffered by black firefighters over the years. I'll be brief.
Please, thank you.
The placing of dog food in the spaghetti with respect to Mr. Pierce is part of a long line of incidents in which black firefighters have been forced to deal with nasty and disgusting items, whether it's feces in their pillowcases, urine in their mouthwash. Mr. Pierce's lawsuit was not playing the race card. It was not looking for a lottery ticket. It was actually the most civil way to respond to the systemic discrimination suffered by himself and other firefighters. In other paramilitary and military units, people resort to fragging and race riots. Instead, Mr. Pierce and these other firefighters decided to do what they're told we are allowed to do in this country when we are aggrieved, which is to file a discrimination lawsuit and ask that justice be done. Denying the settlement will not stop impending lawsuits. Denying the settlement will not produce racial harmony. Denying the settlements will not polish the tarnished image of the Los Angeles Fire Department. Only the work of the council, the commission, and the management of the fire department can change that. Protect the citizens of Los Angeles, protect its employees, and protect its purse. Because when this case goes to trial, if it goes to trial, the amount that will be awarded will be much higher, setting a precedent for higher awards in the cases to come.
Thank you. Colleagues, we've heard from 17 public speakers for about an hour and 10 minutes. We usually do about 20 minutes of public comment. We have 13 other cards left. We can read those names into the record at this point, unless there's a motion otherwise. Okay, I'd like to read the other names into the record then that did come here to speak on this as well. Alicia Mathis, Mohammed Nasruddin, Michael McKinney, Verna Pierce, Lamar Lucas, Eddie Jones, Jackie DuPont Walker, Najee Ali, Ebony Williams, Raquel Young, Julie Boutte, and Charles Brister. Those names will be submitted for the record. That will take us to council comments now, and Ms. Perry is our first speaker. Councilwoman Perry?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just have a few comments to make, and I know we're going to go into closed session on this item. It is perception that led firefighter Pierce to take the action that has brought us here today, and when firefighter Pierce filed and asked for an investigation, I I believe that he believed that he was treated disrespectfully and dishonorably by his colleagues. And I understand that in a legal action, you take your plaintiff as you find him, because these are his perceptions. But I want him to know that I empathize with what he said and what everyone has said here today, because I know, because I've been down that road too. And I know how it feels to have your feelings marginalized and disregarded, and to feel that you don't have proper recourse. You'll never know how much I do understand, but I want to say that to you publicly. I do understand. And I want to thank the NAACP and all the stakeholders who came today. And I want to say, while I'm overjoyed that some of our elders are here today, Mrs. Mobley, Ms. Reed, firefighter Arnett Hartsfield, and I'm grateful that they're in good health and that they're able to be here today. But it must make them physically sick that they have to keep going through this over and over and over again. And it must make them wonder, will it ever stop? As a city council, we've reviewed a settlement proposal within the framework of the lawsuit. And it's my understanding, and now that that information is public, that the city attorney did consider those photos in making a recommendation to council, which we will discuss in closed session. We can't decide what to do with a person's life based on what a talk show says. And for those who've called for the ouster of the chief, if you extend that logic, I would expect those individuals to sustain the council's vote and overturn the veto. And I also want to say, and I know a number of the council people have received dog food in the mail, and I've gotten a couple of packages here myself, right here. Instead of wasting your time sending dog food to us, why don't you take it to your neighborhood animal shelter? This individual and I don't mind the letters and, things like that, because we're public officials. That's what we expect. But what shocks me about this one I got today is the individual who sent it said, there are homeless people who would love to eat this stuff, referring to the dog food. And then he said, give the $2.5 million to them. He says, one more chance you guys have to get yourselves out of this doghouse, not waste $2.5 million on a bogus lawsuit. It's not bogus. This man has feelings. We take pride in what we do. We cannot allow a hostile work environment to exist. That's the responsibility with which we are charged as elected officials. And so I'm glad you're all here today, because the greatest resource we have is to speak publicly, to speak freely, to speak on the record, and to tell the story, because the story is very compelling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Our next speaker is Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to say thank you for coming down. Mr. Pierce, you brought tears to my eyes to know what Mr. Hartsfield went through in his career. That a man could come on the fire department with degrees and be told that he can't be a real firefighter. And there's correlations in dealing with this through other public safety organizations throughout this country and in Los Angeles. And although many people think all of those civil rights gains were in the South, there's many civil rights gains right here in Los Angeles. And I think what we have to realize as we look at this, and as I was speaking on the Ken and Bob show, and I had the great pleasure of having them hang up on me because they said I wouldn't let them speak. And I told them I didn't come on to listen to them, I came to speak. But one of them asked a very profound question. What's harmful about eating dog food is just a lower grade of food. And I said, when's the last time you ate dog food? And it was the first time they were quiet. And I think we have to realize it's not what the intent of the firefighters was, it was how it was received, like any other racism. You may not choose to be racist, you may not want to be, but it's how it's received what's important to understand. We have a firefighter that had every right to fulfill his career. and has now been in a position that he can't. It wasn't a one-shot deal of just the fun or the prank of feeding him dog food. This went around the department like wildfire. To be confronted as you're trying to return to duty and have people tell you you're a dog food boy and bark at you. And this was done by every color of firefighter there is, not just one. But I think what's also important, to show it carried over, to put dog food in his car while he's returning from an assignment, continues to reflect that he was no longer wanted in that department. And I think we have to look at this in a larger issue. It's not a windfall that he's going to have a wheelbarrow full of money. As we saw today with his able attorney, she's going to have to be paid. As we know, if he'd have fulfilled his career, the difference between a 40% pension and a 55% pension, or a 55% versus a 70%, is a significant amount of money for he and his family for the rest of their lives. That's what we're talking about, is making him whole. When he woke up that day, he had no intent of cutting his career short. Someone made that decision for him. And what we have to realize that one thing that is voluntary is when we retire. That is the one decision we get to make. And that's something he didn't get a chance to do. And I think we owe it to him and his family. We owe it to him and his community. We owe it to people to understand that if you are a city employee, you cannot be taken advantage of. And this council has changed a lot of wrong and made it right in my 40 years in the city. I would hope that today we do it one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Our next speaker is Mr. Zine, and then Mr. Wesson, and then Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. If it wasn't for my no vote, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be discussing this matter. It would have gone through, settlement would have been made, it wouldn't have been brought to the public's attention. That no vote has brought this about to the public's attention, about problems in the Los Angeles City Fire Department, about problems of hazing, about problems of disrespect for people. And I've heard from people. I've heard from people in Los Angeles about the outrageous amount of money recommended in this particular settlement. And coming from a 38-year career in law enforcement, and being a minority, I'm Middle Eastern, and I have had a number of comments made that aren't very positive. I have been called many different names during my career of over 38 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, but it was not done, in my opinion, as a negative. It was done in a brotherhood. And when we get to executive session, I'll make some comments regarding the history of brotherhood within military, law enforcement, fire service. But what I don't regret is bringing this percolation to the public's attention in this arena, where people of Los Angeles have been able to hear from Mr. Pierce and others, hear some of the associated problems, hear about the humiliation, hear about what people go through. I'm not African American, I'm Lebanese, but Middle Eastern people are now the target. They're the target because of world terrorism, and I understand that. And I stand here as a representative of the City Council, represent all people in the City of Los Angeles. And when I worked at the police department, I worked 77th Street Division. I worked South Los Angeles. And I know what it's about living and growing up in this city since I'm a native of this city. But what I feel good about is the fact that one no vote made the difference of bringing this to the public arena. Because maybe it's been hidden too long, maybe it's been slighted too long, maybe it's been ignored too long, but now we can have an open discussion and hopefully bring about change so other people don't suffer the similar consequences, don't suffer the similar humiliation, and their families have to endure what people have to endure that are minorities. And this is a city of minorities. This is a city of diversity. And I've traveled to other parts of this world, recently to Asia with the mayor. There's not many minorities there. Not many African Americans or Middle Eastern, not many Latinos. I was in Ireland, not many minorities in those places. But this is a city and this is a country where everyone deserves respect, everyone deserves an opportunity to fulfill their dreams and their wishes. And I believe in that. And I also believe in protecting the taxpayers. I also believe in what is right. And not one comment that was made, and this will be grilled with the city attorney's office, is where the racial overtone comes in. Where the racial overtone, the comments that are racially motivated. The incident I will not justify. The incident I will not say was right. But how that incident turns into a racial incident. If it was a Middle Eastern, if it was a Latino, what would it have been? If it was a white person, what would it have been? The whole focus has been it's now a racist attitude against an African-American firefighter who's done nearly 20 years in protecting people of Los Angeles. That's the concern I have, is where does this then connect with racism? Where is this from a prank, from a hazing, from an incident where firefighter, the photographs, good, bad, or indifferent, the history within the fire department of the situation that have taken place, and I'm sure they've taken place to African Americans and Latinos and Asians. The one photograph I saw with the Asian firefighter that was with yellow mustard, we all know what that represents. But where in this particular situation, where in this situation with the dog food, which was not right, which was wrong, where does that connect with racism? That's the question that I ask, and no one has been able to bring that forward to say that this is a racially motivated situation versus some firefighters that didn't act in a professional manner and a fire captain that didn't do his job at the station house. And the fire captain is the supervisor of the station house. To be involved in it was wrong as the fire captain. He needs to suffer the consequences. But where the racism comes in, that's the concern that I have. How does this equate to racism? If it was me as a Middle Eastern and that was done to me, would it then be racism, or would it be a bad joke? Would it be an irresponsible act by other people? That's the issue that I have. And I appreciate you folks coming down here and giving your comments. And I empathize with Mr. Pierce what he's gone through.
Thank you, Mr.
But for me, I have not seen this as a racial situation. I see this as a bad joke by firefighters who didn't act in a professional manner. Thank you.
Mr. Wesson is our next speaker. Mr. Wesson is our next speaker. Hold on, please. And then Mr. Smith will follow that.
Mr. President, before I say a few words, I want to ask a question. Does this have to go to closed session?
That is the will of the body. We can go either way.
Because in my opinion, you've got reports in the news, everybody knows a lot about this. It would be my preference to discuss this here and now. With that said, no, it's not for that, but thank you.
Yes, Mr. Cardenas, we'll hold your time.
Councilmember Wesson, I think it's appropriate at this time that the city attorney remind this body why we do go into closed session.
Okay, we can hear that. Why don't we let Mr. Wesson finish his speech, and then we'll review that, colleagues. Thank you.
I too want to take a moment to thank the individuals that came down today, and you said some very touching and emotional things. And to Tenny and his family, you know, I'm sorry that your daughter and that you have to go through these things. But members, I just want to be a realist where it relates to this. City Attorney's Office came before us some time ago and laid out the reasons why we should support this settlement. They told us that Tenny was a prankster. We were informed that there were photographs, maybe we didn't see them, but what we did when we took that vote, we figured, based on what we heard from our attorneys, that it would be cost-effective for us to vote to settle the case. Now, I've said before on this floor, governing is not about doing what you want to do, it's about doing what you have to do. And with all due respect to Mr. Pierce's attorney, I don't want to be the one that makes her a millionaire, okay? I mean, there are several cases that are going to come out. Mr. Parks mentioned it last week. We need to realize that it is probably cheaper to stick with the settlement that we voted for. It was based on facts. It was based on the opinion of our city attorneys. I was comfortable voting for it then. I'm comfortable voting for it now. But the one thing that I don't want to see happen is for people to believe that we have not made progress where it relates to racism. I'm proud of the lion's share of the members of the Los Angeles Fire Department and other departments within the city of Los Angeles. Because of Ms. Mobley, because of Ms. Reed, because of others, we had made progress. It's time for us to come together, and members, it's time for us to do our job, to vote, to make sure that we give this man the money that he deserves, and ask ourselves, why are we here? Why don't we read in the paper that the LA County Fire Department is having problems like this? Why are we here? We're here because we've got to have captains that will say, cut that crap out. We have to have leadership that will say, cut that crap out. And the reason why I voted for it, I thought I had a responsibility. I don't want to pay $5 million. But given what I heard from the attorney, we should all be very frightened as to what will happen in the event that this goes to a court of law. In fact, maybe we should let it go. Maybe we should just, let's don't override. Let it go and pay him $6 million, because I guarantee at the end of the day, it's going to be more than this 2.7. And where it relates to going back to renegotiate, let's do that. So what it'll take, 2.5? You're not going to reduce this to 500,000. You're not going to reduce this to 700,000, 1 million. I say, let's bite the bullet. Let's get our department right, and let's move forward. And I don't ever want to see a person come before us again, man, woman, or whatever, that has to deal with the crap that this man had to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Wesson. Well, the city attorney, just as a reminder, as per Mr. Cardenas' request, and then we'll go to Mr. Smith as our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Litigation is still pending in this. Any advice that the city attorney's office gives should be done in closed session in a confidential setting. Otherwise, it may prejudice the city in ongoing litigation. If, for example, council does not vote to override the veto, then the litigation will be pending.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Pierce, I cannot possibly pretend to say I have walked a mile in your shoes. I do not understand racism from the point of view that you've had to suffer it. And so from that point of view, I cannot say I understand what you're saying. I honestly have to look at it from the points of view of what's presented to us of factual information. I can say to you, sir, though, this. I respect what you've made of your life. I respect you went to college and became a firefighter and worked for the people of this city and did a great service to yourself, your family, and our community. I thank you for that service. However, what is before us today is a question of not what Mr. Pierce's contribution has been, not whether he was right or wrong, but the question of what's going on in our fire department and whether or not this was a case of racism. What I see and what I've seen evidence of repeatedly over recent months is a pattern and practice within our fire department of unacceptable, dehumanizing behavior that must stop. And that is a situation that will plague this council for the next year as we reel through the fire department issues. This will plague this council for a long time. The question is, was what was happening in the fire department with Mr. Pierce a case of racism or pranksterism that has gone on as a pattern and practice within the fire department? I looked in the dictionary. It says prank, a mischievous, mildly mischievous act, a practical joke. A prankster is a person who participates in those kind of activities. When I look at this case, I say, was feeding of dog food a truly, honestly, definable situation of racism? And the question is no. In America, I have never seen a case where we say dog food is symbolic of racism. This is not what went on in the police department with the N-word. This is not a comedian making a fool of himself at the Laugh Factory. This is a case of firefighters doing something that firefighters have stupidly been doing for a long time and that has to stop. What happened to Mr. Pierce was a situation that Mr. Pierce participated in himself. He was known as a prankster in the department. It was told to us by our attorney they had a record of pranksterism. And the gentleman stood up and said, what would you do if your daughter was fed dog food? I say, I would be really mad. And obviously so. Would I think it's racism? No. But I would be really mad. But what really makes me mad is that I look at these pictures that we have not seen until after we voted a few weeks ago of what Mr. Pierce participated in. And if my daughter was brought into a firehouse, her pants lowered, and shaving cream sprayed onto her genitals and other areas of her body, that would be something I would be furious about, Mr. Pierce, and that's what you did. You participated in this whole thing that's going on in our fire department. It is absolutely disgraceful and must be stopped. Is it racism? No, because it happened to black firefighters, it happened to Mexican American firefighters, Asian firefighters, female firefighters. It is a practice that goes on. It is not racial discrimination. It is a bad practice and it's got to stop, but it happened to every single firefighter in that department. It is wrong, it is abusive, it is dehumanizing to all races, not just African Americans. And so I'm sorry, sir, this is not a debate. And so the question here today is, do we pay Mr. Pierce for his charge of racism? Or do we look at it and what it is, an endemic problem within our fire department that must be stopped immediately because it is dehumanizing to all firefighters, not just African Americans?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Colleagues, there's nobody else on the speaker queue. To go into closed session, we'll take a motion of that. Mr. Labange.
Members, the great thing about Los Angeles is we've evolved, and we've evolved in time. But, Greg, things happen to people that shouldn't happen to people. And whether they evolve in time, and you could say what happened, I got a call, I used to coach the police department football team, and they said, we used to do this in the old football team, but we weren't in a city building. We weren't under city supervision. We were volunteers playing football with the name of the Los Angeles Police Department. We're now a professional firefighter. This happens. It isn't taken care of properly. And I remember there's someone who sits on this council who once went away on a foreign delegation trip and came back and something happened to his job that shouldn't have happened to his job. It was disrespectful that happened to his job. I think you got to stand up for employees at some point on this issue. I support to reconsider the item as the mayor requested, but at the same time, this is someone who came to be a firefighter with Los Angeles, and in this action, something happened. And that's why I don't like all the talk, the kidding around. Dennis, you could say you were a police officer, kid around. It went too far, and it hurt a man. It hurt a man and his family, and his daughter was on a school bus, and he heard that talk. That's not the way it should be, and I think one thing Los Angeles stands up for, Los Angeles, is its people who work here, okay? And we have to correct it. I like the fire chief a whole lot, but down the line, somebody let it go here. It went too far. So I need the advice of that city attorney who told me it's important to settle this case because of what he reviewed, and I think when we go in closed session, we could bring it up. But I think we can't hurt people. That's what this is all about. Now, it becomes something. It may be a prank, as you call it, but it becomes something where a man gets hurt. And when a man gets hurt or a woman gets hurt, and an employee of Los Angeles, we must stand up for them. So I ask we go into executive session.
That's our last speaker on the queue. Again, it will take a motion. Is that a formal motion, Mr. Labange?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Okay. We'll vote then on whether or not to go into executive session. It's an 8-vote item, colleagues.
Thank you.
This is the second piece of this. I've talked to a number of you. Some would want to go into closed session or have talked about going to closed session immediately. If we do that, I would recommend, as we do when we have folks that are here, to go into our executive room. Others who talked about taking this up with our other items.
Eric, I think it would be good to have it in this room as an executive session. So there's many city attorneys here. I think the room is too small behind us. So I would ask.
And would your motion be to do that immediately then?
Well, I think
or
it's
to do that
to the
with the other
public. I
items?
think if you want to run through the agenda, get the agenda if anybody's here on other business, and then we could go in executive session.
Okay, that's the motion. Yes, Mr. Rosendahl.
Mr. President, I'm wondering if we can do this in open session or as much in open session as possible until the city attorneys say we need to go in closed session. I think
There's nobody
more
else on the
light put
speaker
on
queue,
this,
right?
the
There's
better.
nobody else on the speaker queue right now, so I mean, we still are in open session. Anybody else who'd like to speak can hit their speaker button, and we can continue to
Well, let me make
discuss.
a comment then.
But we
on-
do
on
have the motion before us, so we do have to vote on that just before we go. Do you want to keep the motion? Mr. Rosendall's on the queue. Mr. Labongia, you wanted to wait till after Mr.
Motion to
Rosendahl?
allow him to speak, and then
Okay.
I'd like the motion.
Mr. Rosendahl is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Racism, sexism, and homophobia must stop in this great nation. I'm a gay guy, so I'm sensitive. I'm sensitive to racism and sexism, and I don't tolerate it in any form or any place that I interact with. The fire department and its leadership are a disgrace to have allowed hazing to happen within that department. It's not a fraternity house. It's a professional group of men and women putting themselves in harm's way every single day. And this kind of kid stuff should not have been tolerated. If I'm culpable for anything, I'm new to this council a year and a half, is I can't believe that we allowed this kind of activity to go on and on and on and on all these years. It is a huge disgrace. So I'm very upset that this kind of behavior has been tolerated in this city. Now, I put the motion in to reconsider the award of the $2.7 million. I had voted yes earlier because the city attorneys made a compelling case that if we don't settle it, it's going to cost us more. That was the logic we were dealing with. We deal with it every day in closed session. Is it going to be more expensive if we go to court, or should we settle it here? And we're like, Solomon. We're trying to figure out what's right or wrong for the taxpayer. Well, I put the motion in to reconsider because I did not see those photos until the next council meeting. And the photos I looked at, where the guy was in a sheet that said, "Oy vey, I'm gay," so I could be a little sensitive to anti-Semitism, a little sensitive to homophobia on that particular one. On the gurney business was just too much. And so the whole thing was just too much. But the conclusion I drew at that particular point was it wasn't racism, as best as I could weigh. I'm not Solomon, I'm trying to do the best I can. But it was a prank, like the pranks they've been doing chronically for years and years. So I just want the public to know, and the viewership who watch this stuff on TV or on talk radio, that we're trying to figure out what's in the best interest. Now, if we don't overrule the mayor's veto, then it will go to the courts, and we'll see a jury of 12 people. I've been on 3 juries, picked up at the pool like anybody else. And if that is the process that will truly put this to bed, well, maybe that's the process. But frankly, I don't have enough comfort that this was a racist act. I see this more as a prankster act. Thank you, Mr. President.
That is our last speaker still in the queue. Again, we're in open session for anybody else who wants to speak in open session. Otherwise, we'll vote on going into closed session, and we have the option of when we do that as well. Mr. Parks?
Mr. Parks has a friendly amendment to my motion.
I would just ask that because of timing and the fact that I think every member has an interest in this, that we move forward and get the agenda done so that we get all members back before we go into closed session or even consider a vote.
Okay. I know Ms. Gruhl is gone to an excused appointment, and she will be back, for that. So that motion is before. Okay. So let's vote on going into closed session. Please open the roll. Yes is to go into closed. Yes, Mr.
Correct. It's going into executive session after we go through the agenda.
Absolutely. That's the motion before us. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
9 ayes, 3 noes.
Okay, we will go into executive session then after we run through the rest of the agenda. Let's hold this on the table. And again, we want to thank folks for their patience with this. We will be taking that up a little bit later. Let's go to the next item on our agenda.
Next item, Mr. President, is item number 18, and that's confirmation of Ms. Gloria Ewing Lockhart to the Harbor Area Planning Commission, and a planning report has been submitted.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart, for your patience as well, and welcome. It's great to see you here. And I know that Mr. Reyes is out today, so I don't know if anybody else from the Plum Committee would like to say a word or two about Ms. Lockhart. Mr. Weezer?
Mr. President, as Vice Chair of the Plum Committee, I was not present at the Plum Committee meeting, but I have read the file and talked to Mr. Reyes and believe that Ms. Lockhart would make a wonderful addition to the Harbor Area Planning Commission. Her resume has been floated around to a number of the council members. I ask that we support this addition, and I'm sure we'll continue to do well in the harbor area as we continue to plan well for the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I can certainly speak to the character and the skills of our nominee as well. I've enjoyed working with her over the years, and she's been a great part of this city's community development, and wanted to open it up to see if you have anything to say to the council.
I'm very much honored to serve. I live and work in the harbor area, and my vision for that area is certainly in alignment to the needs of the community. I have two visions for that area, which would be development of affordable housing that's mixed, and also in the development process that we generate jobs for those who live in the harbor area. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gloria. If anybody else like to be heard, seeing none, let's. Oh yes, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. Well, I am happy to support your appointment, but I'll tell you, I'm a little frustrated with the Harbor Area Planning Commission. Twice we've had issues that I thought were very important.
Yes.
You know, the point of the area planning commissions obviously were a local body that knew the neighborhood, knew the community members, and could rule on issues so that, you know, community members would not have to drive all the way downtown. Twice recently, we've not made quorum at the Harbor Area Planning Commission, and they were two very, very, very important issues to the community. So I know it's volunteer, I realize that, but I think when you sit here and agree to be a member of one of these commissions, you really have an obligation to, you know, barring some very extraordinary situation, you need to be there to rule on these. Can you speak to, on the record, to the public, your commitment to actually showing up to the commission meeting so that the business can be conducted? I will tell you, it's been a big frustration for me.
I concur with your feelings, Councilmember Hahn. I attended the last meeting, and there was not a quorum. I just kind of wanted to get a feel for the territory. However, I will say that I am a very passionate person. I am committed to the work that I do. I have been in social work administration for 30 years, and I am a person of my word. I'm very loyal, and I would love to meet with you, sit down, and we can talk about how we can make things happen in that area.
Good, but you realize, again, that you've got an obligation.
Yes, and I will work with my...
Because there's not that many issues that rise to the level of the Area Planning Commission. So when they do,
yes.
I really need for the commissioners to show up.
And I will work with my fellow commissioners to see how we can make that happen.
I love that answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
And I'd love to meet with you and talk about some of my other concerns.
Yes,
Thank you very much, Ms. Hahn, and thank you. That's our last speaker on the queue, so if we can open the roll on the nomination, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Congratulations, Commissioner. Please give our new commissioner a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe Ms. Hahn wanted to take item 50 next, out of order. If there's no objection, let's take item number 50 and recognize Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite up to the table here Jackie DuPont Walker. Is Rafe Sonnenschein still here? Jason, all of you that have to do with the 912 Commission, why don't you come on up? And colleagues, I heard this in committee. Jose and I heard this in committee, and we got a good sense of why they're asking us for a 90-day extension. But I thought this might be a great opportunity for you to address my colleagues, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the process so far, and then why you're asking for the extension, how you think it's going, a little bit of kind of what we talked about in committee, only in a shortened version.
Only for a moment. He'll be right here. Thank you so much. We're glad to come before you.
Would you just
Yeah,
give us
Rafe,
your
come
name for
on.
the record, Altagracia?
Sure.
Yeah, Rafe, if you're asking for 90 more days, get up here.
Thank you. My name is Altagracia Perez. I have the honor of having been elected chair for the Neighborhood Council Review Commission. We have been, thank you.
Hold my time. Hold my time.
We have been working for 4 months on organizing the work of reviewing the system that is responsible for and supports neighborhood councils in our city, as per the charter. Our work has been great thus far. We have been able to organize and identify through consensus items that we understand to be critical to the review of the system, and you'll see those in a few. They will be the ones that will constitute our deliberation hearings. And we have, in addition to that, we have hired an executive director, Dr. Rafe Sonnenschein, who I will turn the mic over to in a moment. I'm also joined by other commissioners, and if they could just take a moment to my vice chairs and then other members of the commission to just briefly introduce themselves.
I'm Jackie DuPont Walker, appointed by the mayor, the resident of historical memory, along with Ray Sonnenschein, because I served on the elected charter commission.
I'm Paul Resnick. I represent the 11th Council District and appointed by the mayor.
I'm Jason Lyon, representing the East area, appointed by the mayor.
I held it, I'm
Siegel,
sorry.
representing Council District 4, Tom Labange. Mark Siegel from Council District 4, Tom Labange's office.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Dr. Sonnenschein to go through our calendar. You'll notice that it identifies a few things, that we spent the beginning of our time together organizing our work, that we have held 2 very successful hearings, the first one with 200 participants, the second one with 100 and lots of public comment. These are diagnostic hearings, and we have been able to identify those issues that are most urgent for the community. We do plan to have a second series of hearings, which is part of why we are asking for the extension. We've decided that the most important thing that we need to do is ensure that there is outreach and that people have a chance to respond to the recommendations that we come up with after the deliberations. And so you'll notice that on the calendar as well, and that is why we ask for an extension of 9 weeks. I am going to turn it over
Yeah,
to
I think if we're in the interest of time, I don't think you really need to go through the whole calendar. I really want you to kind of give us just an overview of where you're at, what you've done, where you're going, and why you need that. I don't think we need to go through the calendar.
Okay, we can do that very quickly. Mr. President, honorable members of the council, very quickly, let me go through where we are and what we're trying to do.
By the way, we've all been enjoying your book. It's a very hot sell around City Hall. So.
Oh, it's always great to have a bestseller because if it's free, it goes way up real high. Thank you. The process has become very ambitious because of interest from the community. And we're focusing in 2 areas, outreach and then research and deliberations. Very quickly, we're dividing our work into 3 parts. A very major outreach effort at the beginning that involves 7 public hearings, which is twice as many as were originally, and originally we're going to have 14. In addition, we are doing a survey of neighborhood council board members, current and past, a survey of city employees who had dealings with neighborhood councils, and outreach to neighborhood or other organizations other than neighborhood councils who have had dealings with neighborhood councils. We'll do that at the beginning. We've then divided our work into 5 periods of deliberation, beginning with visions and values, which we've already started, which is looking at an ideal system of neighborhood councils so we can have as a criteria. Then the next one, which I can't read because it's in yellow. Roles and powers, which is what should be the nature of the organization of neighborhood councils, what authorities should they have, and one of the big questions is should they be considered city agencies or autonomous independent bodies. The third is governance, which is how bodies like Dunn, Bonk, City Council, Mayor, and other parts of the government relate to the neighborhood councils. Outreach and participation, has the system reached the widest array of people, and about election systems, which will be in that area. And lastly, city support for neighborhood councils, which is really more of a technical question, what are the things the city does and how does it work. I want to emphasize that any issue that comes before this council or before the community that is referred to the 912 Commission, as we're colloquially called, will get plugged into one of these areas. Nothing will be left out. It's a commitment to make.
Yeah, I just want to stop you. I think the problem is I think we have thought we were referring things, and you're telling us that they haven't gotten referred.
We've not officially received any communication from the city council, though we have gotten through public comment and, of course, other mediums.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue because I know for a fact I have made comments like I would like to see this referred to the 912 Commission, and we were assuming it was getting referred, and it's not. So there's no mechanism, I guess, for that
Correct.
to happen.
In addition, I want to point out at the top of the page here that the commission will develop draft recommendations at the end of that deliberation period, but they will be draft and will go out to the public for 7 more public hearings during that period of the spring, with the commission leaving open the option to make revisions. And then throughout the summer, the commission will receive public comment. Another survey will be conducted on the recommendations of neighborhood councils, city employees, and members of other community organizations. All that data will be fed in, and then the commission will make final decisions over the course of the summer, and by this calendar comes into the city council in the last week of September with the commission's final recommendations. The ordinance creating the commission called for the possibility of a 90-day extension, and this calendar, which is very ambitious in terms of outreach and research, is built around that request for a 90-day extension. And one additional point is that all of the resources are being put into research and outreach. There's almost nothing being spent on administration by our commission. We're getting almost everything at low cost or doing it on our own for free. It may turn out that because of the scope of this, that we may come back at some point and ask for additional funds. Those would be for research and outreach. And that would be the only reason for that. We just want to alert you. There's no indication we're going to do that right now, certainly, but just to let you know that's on the table. The one request that is there is for the 90-day extension so we can go with this schedule and carry it out to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to, there might be some other questions from council members. We had a very good discussion about how things were moving and how you would be tackling big issues, community outreach. I will say right now that I put my huge stamp of approval on doubling their number of public hearings that they had. We had suggested no less than 7, and they're actually going to double that because they realized when they began going out in the community that, first of all, it was people's first exposure to the 912 Commission, and then many communities said, gee, the next time you come back here, we'd like to, comment on some other things, and they were first told, well, sorry, this is the only time you're going to see us, and then they rethought that, which I think is good. I mean, I think this 912 Commission is about neighborhood councils. It's about the future of neighborhood council, what works, what doesn't work, but I think the public hearings are a huge part of that, just as they were with the Charter Reform Commissions. I know the elected Charter Reform Commission, we had over 200 public meetings, and a lot of what we heard in those public meetings actually shaped a lot of where we went with the city charter. In fact, I believe it was the public hearings that we first began realizing there was such a disconnect between the public and city government, which is where neighborhood councils began to be shaped, was from what could we do to more engage people in the decisions that are made down here at City Hall. And so I really think the public hearings, doubling them is important and right, and maybe even having, more than that if you see fit. One of the things I would like to add as a friendly amendment to this today, or somehow it's troubling to me because I know I have said on this council floor I would like for the 912 Commission to take this up, whether it was the council file issue, and it was my belief that it was the CLA, the city clerk, was taking that and referring it to the 912 Commission. I'm now seeing that that is not happening. So I would like to have something come back as a mechanism, to refer things to the 912 Commission as they continue to go forward with their work. It's not enough, apparently, to make suggestions. We need a mechanism to refer things to this 912 Commission.
I'll second that motion, Mr. President.
Okay, but I am all in favor of giving them extra time. This is, I think, really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The next time we do it, it'll be different, but I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really, we're at the fork in the road in terms of neighborhood councils, and I think this will really help guide neighborhood councils in the future. So I say give them more time. I want a good, thorough report. I want good recommendations. If there has to be some charter changes, I want that to be thoughtful and deliberate and, you know, well done. So I'm for giving them their extra time.
Thank you. And then we have Mr. Rosendahl as our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everybody. I know you as chair of it from being on my show a lot, and it was a pleasure having you. And Paul Resnick is from the 11th District and the West LA Neighborhood Council. I, too, want more time for this, because if this process is open and transparent and really engaging of the citizenry, it can only be a plus for the whole concept of neighborhood councils. My little experience so far as an elected is that I have 8 neighborhood councils in my district. 2 of them are not affiliated with the city. One is the Pacific Palisades, been around 34 years, and frankly is the grandma to the whole neighborhood council concept, and have done a good job because they're nestled in the mountains and they have this ability to interact with each other, and it is open and it does become inclusionary. Then you go right next door to Brentwood, and there's issues about how more open it needs to be, how more engaged it needs to be, how more grassroots it needs to be. Then you go to West LA, and you just had an election, and frankly, 4 candidates are complaining about how that election went, the pluses and the minuses, and who participated and who didn't participate. When we get to Mar Vista, we have more of a transparent overlay of the community. Westchester, I have some problems when they talk about stakeholders. What is the definition of a stakeholder? This is a constant controversial issue. And I might say just now in the election they had there, Playa Vista, God bless them, but they had the right to do it, grabbed their construction workers again, and took the election the direction they wanted to do. So is that okay or not? We have to define stakeholders as we go forward. Venice has gone through many metamorphoses, and right now it's in a great spot. But Westchester and Playa del Rey, there's tons of issues there. Then there's Del Rey and Palms, which are just getting off the ground. But I will say this, as an elected, the more engaged the neighborhood council is in community, renters and homeowners and others, the more effective it will be with me. I actually want land use issues to go before those committees. They're right on the baseline. I want neighborhood councils to have more power. Frankly, when Janice Hahn put that motion in to open up council files, I second it. And I really believe that it should be part of the process. And you know, and your scholarly backdrop will be very helpful as we take this 912 commission to the next level. So congratulations for stepping up to the plate, number one. We want you to have more time. We want it to be an organic, open process. And we thank you for volunteering your service to our great city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. Anybody else wishing to hear? If not, it sounds like you might get an extension, so let's open the roll. Close the roll.
Could I make a
sure,
very
absolutely.
brief comment? Just to
And
say that
don't
we are...
tabulate the vote yet. Go ahead.
Just to reiterate that we would be very pleased to receive communications that are being considered around issues of neighborhood councils from the city council, and know that that's what we will be doing, is we will be reviewing it and using it as part of the research that we need to be able to make recommendations that are responsive to the real issues that are going on with neighborhood councils. But if you want to know what we think about what you should do, you'll have to wait till July.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Weezer.
My sign to speak doesn't seem to be working.
Oh, I'm
I just
sorry.
wanted to thank the members here and Ray for all the work you're doing. This is a very interesting and challenging task you're headed with, but so far, as we heard in committee this morning, I have the full confidence that you will be successful in achieving your goals. And thank you on behalf of the City of Los Angeles, because this is a way to get more people involved in the governance of the city. And there's always a time to ask ourselves, how can we do this better? And that's what you'll be doing as we go forward and make this possible. So thank you so much for the work you're doing on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Weezer. Let's open the roll again. Or if it's just still open, let's close it and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Congratulations, and thank you all for your service.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
All right, next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, is item number 19, and that was called special. Councilmember Grube wished to reopen the public hearing on that item.
We have cards on item 19. If I can ask these folks to come forward. Ms. Gruhl did want me to communicate publicly that she will be watching this on Channel 35 this evening, and that she has her staff here as well. So with that, Mr. City Attorney, did you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to remind council members that this is a fair hearing matter requiring council's heightened attention to the speaker.
Council members, Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Wesson, and Mr. Smith. This is a public hearing item that we, semi-judicial hearing item that we need to be in our seats for. Mr. Rosendahl, if I could ask you as well to join us. Our first speaker is John Paladin. You have 2 minutes. Welcome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. President and President Garcetti and members of the City Council. My name is John Paladin. I urge you to vote no on item 06-1465. This proposal was originally to build 19 townhouses and 3 regular houses in a single-family neighborhood in North Hollywood. The general plan does not allow this type of development. The Planning Committee recommended that the project should be denied. Approximately 60 neighbors signed a statement in opposition to this development. The Planning Committee unanimously denied the application. The owner of the property and the developer appealed. Councilmember Wendy Gruhl overruled the Planning Committee and approved the project as a small lot subdivision with 15 townhouses and 3 regular houses. The townhouses would be out of character with the neighborhood, which is single-family houses on 5,000 square foot lots. The driveway for the townhouses will be on Fair Avenue, which is already overcrowded with traffic and parking. The townhouses will create more overcrowding with excessive traffic and excessive parking on the street. You should vote no on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marcia, is it Krenin? I'm sorry.
My name is Marcia King.
Oh, Marcia Krenin. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Could you come forward a little further just so we can hear you a little better? Thank you, ma'am.
The reason why I came today is because I'm against to changing the zoning. I've been living in the area for 36 years. I raised a wonderful family there. Please, I ask the councilman members to don't vote against to us because changing the zoning is no good. I have faith in you, and don't go against to us, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ernestina McIntosh.
Yes, I am against the zoning change because the development is basing. Yeah. Okay, thank you. The developer, I believe, is basing in the proposal that was originated in 1999. 7 years have gone by, so the neighborhood has more needs: school, traffic, parking, the ability to access the fire department for any emergency. Second, it has only one access and one exit to Fair Avenue. Nothing in the north, nothing in the south, nothing in the east. So in case of emergency, I wonder how that will be taken care. Third is also this development is going to be for needing families. My concern it is just because the needing families, is it fair to put in, due to the proximity to the Department of Water and Power easement, is it fair for those needed families, for those children to have the playground so close to the Department and Power high voltage units? So I urge these council members to please take in consideration and keep the neighborhood as a residential area. They can build single-family homes. We don't oppose to that. But keep it loose and help us to maintain the integrity of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Amar is our final speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you, Mr.
President,
Martin.
I want to personally thank you and and all the council members who are present today for listening to me. I know it's a small little neighborhood, but it means a lot to us. It's a very cohesive community, and a great majority of the people that live there have all voted or do not support this project. I've always admired and I voted for Councilmember Gruhl, but I would urge her to not support this zoning change. This project flies in the face of the general plan and the zoning in the neighborhood. The whole site plan is just terrible for the neighborhood. The only ingress and egress for 15 homes is onto Fair Avenue, which is hugely overcrowded as it is, and it so needs to be reworked. I can't imagine how 18 homes altogether could be put onto this little tiny piece of property, and I would just urge you to please vote against this zoning change, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Cardenas has pressed his button, and then Ms. Gruhl has asked for us to keep it on the desk, so it will still be here in the meeting for that.
Thank you. I'd just like to get some clarity in my mind. I have neighborhoods just like the ones that were just described here a few minutes ago by the residents. Is there anybody from planning here who have the file in mind? Well, we're going to hold it on the desk, but these are the questions I'd like to get answered before we take this up for a vote. First of all, are these units being built, are they for home ownership or are they apartments? I think my understanding is going to be single-family residence on lots that are on average per unit 6,000 square feet, and the surrounding area is R1, which is 5,000 square feet per lot. So those are the things that I'm going to ask questions later when the staff is here and before we take a vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cardenas. So we will keep that on the desk, and we will hold that here. And if we can go to our next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President,
Thank you all
is
very
item
much.
number 20, and that was called social by Councilmember Hahn.
Okay. We have item number 20, Ms. Hahn, before us. I'd like to recognize
Thank you, members of or my colleagues. Mr. President, I just wanted to call this special a long time ago, but I know we've got a lot on our plate today, but I really wanted to say that what's before us today is a project that not just myself, but neighborhood councils and the community at large in San Pedro consider to be a great project. There is almost unanimous support for this project. The Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council, the San Pedro Homeowners Association have given their blessing to this development. And the developer, JCC Homes, has been working with the community for over 2 years. You know, we get a lot of grief sometimes from development projects that come into our district. We get grief sometimes by developers who want to do something in our district. And for a lot of developers, sometimes it's just about the bottom line, and it's not really about the community or the impact on the community. This developer has spent 2 years with neighborhood councils, with homeowners around his project, really working with them, changing the design, bending over backwards to try to mitigate traffic concerns, agreed to improve a local community park. But really, the project itself is what is going to benefit San Pedro, because it is on the site of an oil storage yard that has been there a long time, Kinder Mortgage storage tanks, which before the community was built, they were there, but now they certainly don't fit in a residential community. The community has wanted them gone for a long time. It's been a blighted area, and this will be 134 detached homes that will really, first and foremost, it will eliminate this blight and clean up this neighborhood. But more than that, it will be a project that, again, has been designed with the community in mind. And for that, I ask you to support this, to give an aye vote to this, because it is a project that is a good project. And it's a project that, I've got to say, it's because of the sincerity, it's because of the integrity of this developer that it is going to be such a good project for San Pedro. And I look at it, and I look at the process that we've gone through for the last 2 years as a model of how development projects should go in a residential neighborhood and anywhere in the city of Los Angeles. So I wholeheartedly support this project. But again, it's not just me. It's the neighborhood council, it's the homeowners organizations, it's the people who are living next to this site. So I ask for an aye vote on this project so we can move forward and build it. That's right. Do I have an amen?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Amen. Ms. Hahn.
Thank you.
Okay, that closes our public comment on this. Open the roll, please. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Thank you. That is approved. Next item, please.
Go build
Item
it.
number 28, call special by Councilmember Parks.
Okay, we'll hold that for one moment. And what's the next item after that?
Next item, Mr. President, is item 42A, and there is a substitute motion that has been distributed on
has
that
been,
item.
okay. If there's nobody wishing to speak, let's go ahead and open the roll on that. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. Can we go to the next item?
Yes, Mr. President. Item number 42D was adopted previously. However, there is an amending or substitute that has been distributed to the council in the interim. Do you wish to reconsider that so council can adopt the substitute?
Okay. I think we will, so we need to reconsider to do that?
Yes, Mr.
Okay, let's
President.
open the roll in reconsideration. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
All right, that is now before us. If we can take the substitute motion.
Yes, and it has been distributed to the council members.
Okay, let's open the roll on substitute motion. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved.
And item 43 was called special by Councilmember Perry, but I believe her questions have been answered, and she's okay with voting on that item.
All righty. We have that item before us. Sorry, I have no cards on that. Did you want to speak on that, Ms. Hawkins? I have no card on it. Why don't you come forward and take public testimony at this time? Is that requiring public?
Yes, it does.
Okay, please come forward, and we'd be happy to take your comments.
Okay, no
Thank
problem.
you.
That is on item
Go
number
ahead.
28. Thank you. Again, my name is Ms. Sylvia Lynn Hawkins. Before development these fees and permit policies plan, we must be aware of these con artists and schemes of health care, hiring people $40 an hour, 40 hours a week or more. These leaders and owners has lost their contract with the United States of America and are wicked anti-choice or anti-Christ large business owners. The downfall is to fake out all workers with a plan of Medicare benefit, dental, pharmacy, hospital care on interview day. They must overwork all workers since registering to kill want work. You must remember, you didn't come to work on the first day sick. Using these company health care cards, you are bound. In order to eat or drink, you don't need a pill. Remember, you are not sick the first day of work. Therefore, it is called, when is the day that you became sick and used the card? Now back to medication. I am with no health care plan. I'm with paying them more money per hour, even $15 an hour, but no Medicare plan of ABC coverage because they came to work the first day not sick. Now, we cannot take care of their bed problems. It is too many sickness and diseases out. Now we put in names on sickness and disease. And I am against any health care plan. Thank you very much. My name is Ms. Sylvia Lynn Hawkins.
Thank you very much. Ms. Perry?
I called this item special because I'm asking for the community's help in bringing justice to the murder of Ronel Villanueva and injuries to his brother. On November the 17th, 2006, Mr. Villanueva was fatally stabbed near the intersection of Figueroa Street and Slauson Avenue. He was with his brother and they were crossing the street when they were confronted by a suspect. After exchanging a few words, the suspect proceeded to stab both Mr. Villanueva and his brother. Mr. Villanueva died near the scene, and his brother was transported to a local hospital where he remains in critical condition. The suspect and a female companion left the scene south on Figueroa Street. And again, I'd like to say, we can't stand by and let this happen. So I'd like to ask anyone who knows anything about this crime to please step forward and call 1-877-LAWFUL. That's 1-877-529-3855. And anonymous calls are welcome. Please, let's find some justice for Mr. Villanueva and for his brother.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perry. Anybody else wishing to speak on this? If not, let's open the roll on the reward motion, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Now that is approved. We can go back to the one called special by Mr. Parks. That was item 28. Please, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, before I get to 28, I'd like to make a motion on item 1 because we do not have a full body here today.
Okay.
If we can continue the item 1 till tomorrow, including the executive closed session, so that all members will get an opportunity to hear from the city attorney, and we will not be asking people to vote for the item without hearing the closed session discussion.
All right, Mr. Parks, colleagues, it's been seconded by Mr. Wesson, has asked for us to continue the item number 1 till tomorrow. Is there any objection to that?
Does this include waiving fees for block parties and stuff like that?
No, no.
Oh, I'm sorry, number 1 was the Tenny Pierce item that he's saying that we would
We're going to
continue.
get to 28 in just a second.
Yeah. Is there any objection? If there's no objection, Mr. Parks moved to continue item number 1, the Tenny Pierce matter, till tomorrow.
Because all members will be here.
Okay. If there's no objection, then that, I'm sorry, Mr. Cardenas?
I'm sorry, I don't know if this question was asked, but on that motion, are we expected to have all council members here tomorrow?
All members are expected to be here. It's Mr. Padilla's last day with us, so we have kind of a special, generally light agenda, except for that part. So otherwise, we are pretty light tomorrow. But everybody's expected to be here. I think we have Ms. Perry excused to leave early, Mr. Parks excused to arrive late, a little bit.
Well, we can need to work.
Oh, sorry, vice versa.
What am I going to?
Okay. Vice versa, but we'll work with both of them. And Mr. Rosendahl is excused to leave at 1 p.m. tomorrow as well. Okay. All right. If there's no objection, then we will continue item 1 until tomorrow. Okay? Let's return to item 28. Mr. Parks?
28. Thank you very much. May I have the staff come up on item 28, please? Colleagues, while staff is coming up, this has been a long road to try to address an issue that we have been dealing with for the last couple of years, and it's been driven by a desire to change our processes. It's been driven by how we've looked at our financial guidelines, and also it's been driven by some legal issues that may confront us down the road. And let me ask the CLA to start off the discussion as it relates to where we are and why we are moving in this direction, so we can just give a thumbnail of what this means to us and how we conduct business in the future.
Okay. Well, the item before you today, excuse me, is only development fee waivers. This is part of a very large financial policy report that the CAO and my office put out. And I think there were some questions about whether this deals with special events and block parties and other things. What's before you today is the development fee waiver policy. And in a nutshell, it in essence authorizes a subsidy of development fees for bona fide nonprofits that provide a public benefit, and in essence is furthering activities and actions that would otherwise be the responsibility of the city. There's $750,000 in general city purposes that would be allocated, $50,000 per council office for subsidizing development fees for construction projects, in essence, for nonprofits, as well as entities that are building public infrastructure that the city otherwise would have had to have funded.
And Ray, you've been a part of putting all this together. Would you tell us just a thumbnail on what some of the legal issues and why the city is moving from waiver to subsidy?
Ray Schreiner with the CAO's office. We had originally released our first report regarding development fees back in, it's been almost a year, January 2006. And subsequent to that, we've released a couple of reports. But part of that process, we asked the city attorney to weigh in on some legal issues. And one of the things that they had addressed was the concept of fee waivers versus fee subsidies. What we started off was with waivers, where we wanted to look at whether it's possible to waive fees and permit and things of that sort. Whereas now, based on the city attorney's advice, is no, what we are doing here with this policy is we will be subsidizing those fees, mainly due to some requirements that contained in Prop 218.
Okay. And then when we subsidize, from the CAO standpoint, and I'm sure the CLA, it also kind of helps departments get through the year as opposed to them losing revenue that they normally be expecting.
That's correct. When we look at building and safety, and as we move on to convention center and perhaps some other departments as well, is the whole concept about behind Prop 218 is we can only charge a fee for the cost of that service. And so what we are attempting to do is make sure we remain within those legal parameters, and at the same time provide those departments that charge that fee, make sure they have sufficient revenue to cover their expenditures.
And then as we move continually with the financial policies, I think the next thing we're going to try to tackle is special events and...
well, hopefully it will be convention center, but we do have a special event.
Convention center is a unique situation, and we'd like to throw in also things such as the Shrine and other places where there are citywide venues that we have, so we have those issues. But then the next would be special events, so that we continue to move forward on trying to give some order to our prior waiver program and our new subsidy program.
And that's correct.
Okay. Now, in the future, I think the way it's written is the expectation is currently we're implementing a funding mechanism. That funding source or account will be for all subsidies in the future.
That's correct. Now, for the current year budget, $750,000 was set aside with the intent that it would be divided by 15. Now, certainly, I should back up. This proposed policy is to go into effect in January. Okay. Certainly, as we review and go through the 2007-2008 budget process, I think we need to look at the policies and the items that are to be included as far as the policies, and we're going to have to look at whether or not the 750 is sufficient or whether we should take a second look at that.
Okay. And we've briefed Karen to be kind during that budget process, right? Okay. Now, colleagues, we wanted to just give you a thumbnail. This is a new approach in how we're dealing with subsidies. The first order of business, which we thought was the easiest one, but it's taken us quite a while. But the issue is getting developmental fees done, come back with convention and other centralized citywide facilities, and then move from there to the most, I think, complicated is dealing with special events and our, what do we call it?
We also have the nonprofits,
but dealing with the farmers markets. Farmers markets.
Yes, exactly.
Those are the ones that are going to be a little bit more dicey to get done, but those are the ones I think we will move on. But we just wanted to give you a little capsule view of what and how this has changed, and hopefully as we move forward on the other ones that will fit very neatly into the financial policies, that gives us a little better sense of not only where the money's coming from, but how much we spend on an annual basis. At this time, I don't think we can really pull together a guess as to all of the waivers that we address in any given year. This will give us a much better accounting.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Mr. Labange is our next speaker.
Thank you very much. I rise to loyal opposition in the sense that I want to know basically how much is the 4th District in the last 20 years spent on special events? Do you know?
On special events?
Whatever the case may
No,
be.
again, this is not special events before you today. These are development fee waivers for nonprofits.
What have we spent on nonprofits the last 20 years?
We don't have that on a breakdown per council office.
But can you get that? Because see, here's the thing, remember, some of us may have agencies that need our help, and I would like to at least know, is $50,000 allotted per each council office, is that correct? Is that the ballpark figure?
Yes, that's right, for this fiscal year, and then
For this fiscal year?
For the remainder of the fiscal year, and then we'd be dealing in the budget in the spring. We'd get a sense of whether that's enough and what the financial requirements are.
But do you know what, let's say, the 4th District has done?
See, unfortunately, those are done ad hoc by motion, and no, they haven't been tracked per district. I mean, to try to recreate that,
But I think it's very important to have that information, because I want to be able to, I want to be a good person and follow the policies of our budget and finance, but at the same time, I want to deliver for my district and those who deliver for the people in creating these various not-for-profit agencies, whatever they may be. So I would like to know what has been my typical cost and that of my predecessor, Mr. Ferraro. Maybe I ask the chair, he could maybe...
The one thing, this is a starting point. This money was put into the UB only as a starting point. We're going to have to make some decisions, hopefully not before the end of the fiscal year, but at some point of what that fund should be on an annual basis. We have information that maybe as much as $10 million might be waived citywide on special events. We need to really chart that, but this is just for the developmental fees. And I think we have a figure. What's the citywide figure on developmental fees that we came in?
The development fees was approximately $1.3 million.
How much is that for not-for-profit housing?
That I don't.
But
do
you
not
could
know.
find out, because
But
you
we
got
could-
computers in your office. And I think all this information would help us get it. And also, I think, too, on special events, if the Clippers or the Lakers, good luck to both of them win. If the Dodgers win, I want a parade down Main Street. I want a parade down Broadway. And I think these are special events, too, that should be...
Not
that's
if
what
they
it's-
win, it's when they win, right?
When they win, thank you very much. So,
One thing I would like to address your question is, in the last year and in the current year, actually, the CLA is starting to track a lot of this data by council office.
but I
so
think
we can
I
get
got
better-
some from Building and Safety that told me exactly the number of units that were built in my district, and I'm sure they have computers too, and they could punch this up quickly. Information is knowledge is power, and if we're going to make the determination about our constituencies, I think it would be important. Now, I would go along with this to support the budget and finance if we have a recall of this matter, if we feel that we haven't put the proper number in there. I know you'd rather do the opposite, so let me hear Ms. Hahn's arguments. I'll sit down, Mr. President.
Mr. Rosendahl is next, and then we'll come over to Ms. Hahn, and then Mr. Parks for a second time. Mr. Rosendahl.
Just to give us focus, tell us what we're doing here.
Very
Gary.
good question. I've never asked that question.
Okay, what's before you today is one segment of the financial policies. This has, on occasion, if nonprofits are building a new building, they will come to the city and ask that development fees be waived, building and safety fees, et cetera, et cetera. The practice has been by motion, a council member brings in a motion and gets the council to approve waiving those fees.
Right.
That in a nutshell is what's before you now. This sets policy guidelines on when that will occur and how it occurs, and establish some criteria about what nonprofits qualify, furthering city business. There have been instances where for-profit developers have built roads, have done curb improvements, have done other things that the city would have had to have done, and have come to the city and say, I'm happy to do this, but can I get the fees waived? We're saving you a lot of money because I'll pay for it. I just don't want to have to pay the development fees, the plan check fees, and the other things to get it done. So this sets a framework for that one single element of the financial policies.
And
Now,
here
also in the budget, the council put aside $750,000 in general city purposes, for fee waiver purposes. What this would do is allocate $50,000 per council office to sort of set a framework in place, and then through the budget process every year, we will look at whether that's enough, whether the formula needs to be changed. It's essentially a framework to start, putting some finality and getting some good information on how this occurs.
And the 50,000, would that be discretionary by the council office, how they decide that?
Yes, in essence.
Within the framework of the policy?
Within the framework of the policies, it would be discretionary within the council
Can
office.
you give us the framework policy, define it to us in simple terms?
Well, in simple terms, it would have to be for, again, the first issue would be to waive fees for somebody who was building public infrastructure that we otherwise would have had to have done ourselves.
Okay, good.
Then you have nonprofits, bona fide nonprofits, which in a nutshell are sort of furthering city services, delivering services to the public, doing after-school programs, that Rec and Parks might otherwise be doing, bona fide 501c3 nonprofits.
So anybody who's a 501c3 would fit in that category, or would they have to justify what they're doing?
Well, not anybody. They would have to be delivering services that, in essence, the city is in the business of doing.
Right.
Okay. So it establishes that framework. It sets a limit on the percentage of fees per project that can be waived. you know, so that the city's not
How have we been doing it up to this point?
ad hoc by motion.
And so some districts have waived more than 50,000, right? And others have done less.
Again, that's, over the years, I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So will there be some of that opportunity, say if one district has a lot more going on than other districts, that there would be a difference in that fee figure? Because 50 grand across the board suggests we're all alike.
Well, exactly, and yes, I mean, at the end of the day, 8 of you decide what the policies are going to be. But what this is going to do is put a framework in place so that the CLA and CAO can track the expenditures, can report back to you on if there are differences in needs in certain communities, whether the money should be allocated differently. It really sets a framework so that we can get the information you need to make those decisions down the road.
Great. Well, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. Ms. Hahn is our next speaker.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, I just have, I have some current concerns with this recommended policy, colleagues. You know, again, I wish we had before us a real policy about, you know, waiving fees for special events, because I think we are absorbing fees of some very rich corporate entities out there when I don't really know if we need to. But this is something I think is going to be harmful to nonprofits who are attempting to partner with us in, as you said, delivering services that we might not otherwise be delivering. But for me, it's really about building affordable housing. And, you know, we all were hoping Prop H would pass, and that was going to be a way for us to get more money into our control to help give incentives and help partner with developers to build affordable housing. That did not pass. If you recall, colleagues, just last week I brought before you a Habitat for Humanity project that will be building homes, and I asked us to waive the building fees and permits. That equaled $48,000 for one project, and I talked about it in terms of this is a way for the city to partner with nonprofit organizations to fulfill something that, as a policy, we believe in, which is building more housing that people can afford in Los Angeles. And Habitat for Humanity is one of those organizations I believe we should be partnering with. Well, part of how we partner is to waive these fees. According to this recommended policy, we would only be allowed to waive 50% of what they're asking for. Well, you know, that's a huge amount for a Habitat for Humanity to absorb, and I dare say they would reduce the number of houses that they were planning to build if they had to tack on their, you know, another $25,000 in fees. You know, that's a certain amount of money that could go towards building another home. So I would have sort of shot my wad on one project, so to speak. Well, I wouldn't even been able to do that because I wouldn't have been allowed to even waive 100% of those fees. So I don't like this policy. I think it's harmful to some of our nonprofits. I would like to see it maybe tweaked a little bit. But again, I have real issues with this. And again, I think we ought to be in the mode, colleagues, of partnering with these nonprofit organizations. And if a way we can do that to further delivering the services that we as city government should be obligated to provide, like decent housing, then I think we ought to do it. I think this limits our ability to partner for that. So I would like, first of all, I would like to see, I'll take another second, I would like to see a more detailed breakdown per council district of these development fees and permit waivers per council districts, per project, so we have a better sense, colleagues, of how we have been partnering with these nonprofits and how they've been able to really provide things for our constituents that we were not able to do. So I'm not quite ready to support this yet.
Mr. Parks is our next speaker, and then Mr. LaBonge.
Let me just comment. I think all the issues you have a concern about, I think are resolved. It's just that instead of waiving the fees and the department scuffled during the year and say we don't have money, or that we're using money that they were budgeted for, or they're not getting fees that they believe they should have, and then putting us in some legal bind to where someone could potentially sue us because they're saying you are charging fees for me, but yet fees that I pay are paying for someone else's project, is the reason for the transition into subsidy versus waiver. The other issue is what was discussed is that this is a starting point. And so if we figured that if you're spending 1.2 citywide on developmental fees, for 6 months, there's $750,000 there. The other issue that comes up is that we have the ability to borrow from our neighbors, because in the 8th District, we've never waived a developmental fee. We spend most of our money on dealing with special events. And so the only issue on the funding is that you don't get to roll it over year to year and collect it. It just puts money back into departmental budgets, so they're not running short, and the general fund later has to fill that gap at mid-year or the status reports. So we're just giving them the money that we budgeted for and saying, let's not waive, let's subsidize. But you have the freedom that you have, and if we've only spent 1.2 as a council for a 12-month period, $750,000 starts January 1st for a 6-month period. So we figured it's more than half of the year, and as we move forward for Convention Center and others, we'll have to add more money to that account. So I think it covers most of your concerns. And the other issue about
50%.
50% was put in there, a couple of things were put in there, because some of the nonprofits, the CAO and the CLA and the city attorney came up with, they want to evaluate whether they are truly nonprofits or are they multi-million-dollar organizations that have a nonprofit status. And so it's a view of trying to balance where and how we expend our money and how and who receives our subsidies. So if someone is building a major housing development project, paying half the fees, in our judgment, was not going to cripple or stop them from developing the project. And so,
Yeah, I disagree with that.
yeah.
Mr. Lavange.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. But listening to Ms. Hahn's statements and what she spoke of, my concerns, I think we should continue this 30 days, Mr. Parks. Let us digest it. Let us come back with some ideas, because I think there's areas that we're not thinking of right now that we have helped people that we would not be able to maximize. And even as Ms. Hahn said, what if 50% means that a organization like Habitat for Humanity can't do what they should do? That's a lot. That's a lot somewhere. So I ask that we continue at 30 days so we can review this, and also ask that the CLA brief council officers who want it in the office to have further understanding of this very important policy proposed.
Ms. Hahn?
Thank you, and I agree with that. I think there needs to be a little more. And frankly, if the issue is whether or not they're a real nonprofit, that's another issue. But to say the 50% rule somehow is going to, somehow vet whether or not they're real or not, it's not a matter if it's going to cripple them, but it's a matter of, are we doing all we can to make sure that they can maximize what they're doing that we're not doing? So, I mean, I think that's an issue, whether or not they're a legitimate nonprofit. That ought to, you guys, we need to figure that out in another area. But I don't think to vet that through, we're only allowed to waive 50% of the permit fees or development fees. I don't think that's the right way to get at that information. We certainly need to get at whether or not they're legitimate, but that, to me, does not get us that answer. It just, I think, doesn't cripple an organization, but it doesn't allow them to do what they want to do. I want to maximize our dollars with nonprofit dollars to do what sometimes government can't do.
Well, if I could, I think a lot of the 50%, and one of the reasons why, although initially this seemed like a pretty straightforward policy, it is extremely complicated. Part of the issue is when nonprofits come forward, the difficulty is, can they really not afford to pay the fees? What are their other sources of funding? Do they have private sources? Are they getting federal grants? Are they, I mean, the difficulty is it was determined to be a mechanism that at least tries to force them to bring to the table other money to cover some of the stuff so that the city taxpayers aren't covering it all. Again, that's part of the complications on policies. They don't really necessarily apply to all situations. In the housing issue, for example, this is really meant to focus on the general fund. There would be nothing stopping a housing project from coming forward using housing trust fund money or CRA housing money as part of developing the project, and using some of that money to pay the general fund fees that wouldn't qualify under the policy. So it's not meant to mean that that's the only public money that would be in a nonprofit project. It's really focusing on what the city departments are absorbing to process essentially plan checks and inspections for these development projects.
Yeah, again, I don't like that 50% requirement. I think, again, if you're trying to get information by using that, I think that's the wrong way to get it, and I think it should still be left up to us whether or not we deem a project worthy, we deem the nonprofit worthy, and whether or not we think it is in the city's best interest to waive the fees. So I concur, Councilman Labange, we need some time to kind of look at this and maybe tweak it a little bit.
30 days.
Okay.
There's no time.
Mr.
30
Parks?
days, okay?
You know, the issue, I think, this has only been hanging around since April.
It's okay.
And the issue is what we're trying to do is to move forward, and if we delay it 30 days, you will not have the fund set up from January. And that was why we tried to get this done, so you'd have at least access for the money come January. So the very issue that you're concerned about, you're delaying getting access to the money. The other issue, I think, realistically, all of us have to realize we can't keep waiving at the rate that we're waiving. Because in effect, although we budget for each department, at the end of the day, the CAO has to come up with a report on the monthly status or the mid-year review and replace all those waivers that have no control in effect of how it's spent, how much is spent, and those issues. So that's why this went forward, and that's why we tried to set it up and did not go to the larger pot of special events as the first one because it's more complicated. We felt we'd deal with this one first. And again, we're going to have to make a decision as a council, maybe before the end of the year, if everyone exhausts their money, or certainly by the next fiscal year, so that when you get a full allocation of money, you'll have the ability to use it. So again, I would not like to delay it beyond its implementation of January 1st, because it's been a long haul to get it to this point.
All right.
Mr. Labange is
Let me just ask then, how about 2 weeks?
Well, let me ask the CAO, what does that put us in number of meetings in the sense of when we can, and getting it implemented for January 1st? There's only how many meetings left?
2 weeks is till the 12th of December. That would give us, we have one more week of meetings after that one.
Right.
And,
Yeah, you could do
So
it.
we have a,
yes.
Is 2 weeks going to be enough to get back the information that I think we want to make a good decision on this? Like a breakdown for every council district, every housing project, how much they were waived, how much we're, I need to know that information before I agree to this. Is that enough time, 2 weeks, to get that information back?
Good point.
And I think every council member deserves that before they rule on this policy. You need to know what you're doing in your own districts, how much money you've been waiving, and before you make this decision.
but I think for every council member, 1.2 million for the year. This starts January 1st, it's $750 for 6 months. I think we can do the math and say it covers over half of the expense for half the year. And so, again, we're going to have to add to it, but also we're going to have to deal with it more in depth come July 1st. So the issue is, it's a matter of starting point, and you can wait and get it perfect and end up without a system for a long period of time.
But I don't think in our business it has to be perfect. We
Well,
have
that's what
to
we're trying
make a decision. I mean, ultimately it has to be perfect, but make a decision. And I think what Ms. Hahn said, Mr. Garcetti, the meeting is the 12th, but we may
2
need
weeks would
more
be the
time
12th.
for the information to be gathered by the city administrative officer. If you could speak to that question?
Maybe what I'd like to suggest is if we can continue the item for 2 weeks, we will meet, we'll talk to building safety, see if they can get a breakdown. Talk to planning, I know has not tracked the data. They
But
need to start
let me just make
tracking data.
another suggestion, yeah.
But we will look at building safety. We will also like to extend the offer to meet with individual council offices to explain and go through the policy and what's contained in here to make you guys feel comfortable as far as reviewing as what's proposed. What we want to make clear to everybody is that the 50,000, the money that's in GCP, that's one issue. And we realized we had provided some information to committee that is nowhere adequate as far as what's being waived today. But we want to make, what the point we want to make today, though, too, is that we can no longer waive fees. We have to, because of some of the legal requirements that we're facing with Prop 218, we want to make sure that whatever we're doing, that we fall within those parameters. And now what we're saying is we need to subsidize those projects by providing building safety, the appropriation to do that type of activity for whatever project is being proposed.
Thank you. I just appreciate that. Members, information is knowledge is power, and statistics. And I think Avak, what was it, Chuck Drescher? Was that the guy at the old Data Service Bureau? The first, Greg says yes. All this information we really should have. It's real simple if we just ask the right questions. That's what my sociology professor said at Cal Poly. Ask the right questions, and ask the right questions. How many nonprofits did we serve? What are their needs are? What are the funding? Mr. Billy made a very good point that you could maybe tap CRA or other housing trust funds to pay for the general fund costs. But we should figure that all out instead of handcuffing it right now that may not let someone go forward with their project. And I would like to ask, if I did mention Mr. Miller, Mr. Avak over there, to ask him to write a motion about statistics, that we have to get better statistics and information on all these matters of whether units are being built, how they're being built, how much do they cost to be built, etc. So with that information, the CAO feels comfortable, Ms. Hahn, that they could have the information within 10 days so we could mull it over for hearing it again in 2 weeks. And we'll call Mr. Edelman over at Building and Safety, who's very effective at getting that statistical information.
Mr. Smith is our next speaker.
In committee, Ms. Hahn, I asked for, because I know I will never use 50,000 in my district, quite frankly, so I wanted to make sure that we have the ability to loan other districts that money. But what Mr. Parks wanted to do is make sure we took the money we're spending, divide it equally, and then we'll adjust from there. We have to get something on paper now. We have to go forward. And we have to at least start on this process. And then if we need adjustments, we can come back and make that. But we at least got to get the policy in place. We've been fooling around with a number of these policies on waivers now for a year. And we have to go forward and do something to continue the fiscal constraints that we started a year ago. And this is one more piece of that puzzle, of fiscal constraints that we place on ourselves, and that we know what we're doing. So I think a couple of weeks gives you an opportunity to get at least some, wrap your arms around some of this, get some of the information for yourselves, for those that need that information, and at least get the policy in place in January so we can go forward as we go through the rest of this fiscal year. And then in the budget, if we need to make adjustments, we can make adjustments. But we need the policy, we need to go forward, and for those of you who will spend more, and there are a number of the districts around here who will spend more, come to us and we will do what we can to help you, because I know in my district we will never use $50,000 for this kind of housing. So I think we need to do what Mr. Parks has suggested. Mr. LeBon, I suggested 2 weeks would be fine. Gives us a chance to do both. Give you a chance to look at some of the numbers, and yet at the same time, give us a deadline so we can get this in place, be ready for January 1. So I think the council, we need to just do 2 weeks, and then we have to decide on this issue.
Mr. LeBon, and then Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you. I called too one time on the old parking meter fund. Mr. Ferraro, the 4th District, loaned money to the 15th District from Wilshire Western. Never got the money back, but it helped the 15th District. So that's it, all works out. All right, thank you.
Ms. Hahn?
Thank you. I appreciate the need to get a policy on paper, and it's part of our, as you called it, our fiscal prudence policy, and I understand that. But to me, before I agree to this, especially the 50% one, to me, it's also about our ability to invest in things like affordable housing. And we know that every dollar spent for affordable housing leverages like $5 to build housing. If the city invests $1, we can leverage $5. So I don't want to just look at this as limiting us, as preventing us from spending money. I want the whole policy to reflect my philosophy, which is investing in these nonprofit groups, which help us achieve our goal of building housing that people can afford. So that's all, I mean, so my view is a little different. I just want to make sure this policy reflects both sides of being fiscally responsible, but also the ability to use these dollars, these subsidies, as an investment in housing. And that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
All right, that is our last speaker. So we have that motion before us. Is there any objection to that continuation and report back? If not, we'll continue that 2 weeks. Okay? Thank you
And the
very
new
much.
date is December 12th.
December 12th is when we'll take that up next, correct? Okay. We have item 19 left, which we had on the table from before, and Ms. Gruhl is back with us, so I'd like to recognize Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcetti, and I want to thank the members of my community that were here earlier, I know that testified. This was a difficult issue in my district because we were trying to balance the needs of some of the homeowners with their single-family dwellings and at the same time create some affordable homeownership opportunities. And I know that my residents were here today, and I want to assure everyone here that we did everything we could to address their concerns while at the same time preserving their project. We reduced the density of the RD6 units from 19 to 15. We required that each house and lot be individually owned, and we required that the project have the look and feel of the single-family neighborhood that surrounds it, and be marketed to people such as firefighters, teachers, police officers in our communities. And I think it is a significant step to us providing that type of housing. And I want to commend New Economics for Women and B. Stotzer for their pioneering work. This particular infill project had a lot of challenges. It's a very irregular lot, 2.5 acres in area. It had limited access from 3 different streets, and most importantly, half of the property was consumed by a power line easement, which didn't allow us to build in the manner in which we probably would have recommended initially. The current zoning would permit 21 lots, R1 lots, but the site's geometry and encumbrances would cut that number in half. And earlier City Council recognized those difficulties and actually approved an identical project, but those entitlements were lost through the passage of time. And so because of the unique nature of the site and the quality of the proposed project and the developer of that project, I do ask you to support this project, and we'll continue to work with the neighborhood and the communities to move this project forward and to address any concerns that they may have. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cardenas.
Yeah, just for the record, Wendy, I think you helped clarify some of these things, but I want to make sure that we don't accidentally not answer some of the questions that I asked earlier. Just if you can answer this, these are home ownership units, correct? Single-family detached?
Correct.
Correct. And then also, the surrounding area is R1, which is only required to have 5,000 square foot per lot in an R1 area.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that because for a few minutes there, I got the feeling from the public when they were talking about it, it seemed like they were talking about it extremely dense, non-home ownership-like, et cetera. So based on the answers to your questions, to my questions, Wendy, it seems like I have some neighborhoods just like this where there's R1, and having RD6 in an R1 area, if done well, actually blends in very, very well. So I just wanted to clarify that before I vote on it, and I'll be voting aye. Thank you.
Great, and thank you if I could on your time answer. One was, again, we made some changes to the project to make it more compatible with the area and to address that issue. This was a unique, as I mentioned, geometry and way in which we had to develop the project, but I think it will be an addition to the neighborhood, and hopefully everyone can enjoy it and have some new homeowners in that community. Thank you, Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much. So last speaker, let's open the roll on the item, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Does that complete our non-closed session items, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. President. Do you wish to clear the desk before going into closed session?
Sure, let's go ahead and do that.
Council has motions for posting and referral,
Those are posted and referred.
and that clears the desk.
Okay, colleagues will now go into closed session. Oh yeah, sorry, Mr. Rosendahl?
Let them come up and talk about the billboards in open session before it gets into a closed session mode.
Sure, we can, there's a move to talk about
I
that?
move that we do some public discussion.
Okay, is there any
on this.
objection to that? If there isn't, let's go ahead and we can take that item. Which item number is that, Madam Clerk? 62, okay. And would you like to be recognized as our first speaker, Mr. Rosendahl? Okay.
If we-
We'll wait
as
for
soon
the
as I
lawyers
get up
to
here
come
to-
right up. No problem.
Good afternoon. Before we go into closed session, I'd like you to share with us as much as you can right now of what we're dealing with here.
You want to start?
I'd be happy to start. This is Steve Blau, Deputy City Attorney, City of Los Angeles. If you recall, about 4 years back, the city instituted an inspection program. The purposes of that inspection program were to get an inventory of what exists in the city, to have a cost-neutral program whereby the city recovers its costs of canvassing the streets and inspecting these signs, to ensure the safety of these signs, and to remove signs that might be illegal. What we have in terms of settlement that has been approved by the court in Vista and a settlement that has been approved in substance by the council, concurred in by the mayor, but not yet signed, is an inspection program that will result in the immediate takedown of a very large number of structures in the city, will result in an inventory of all of the structures in the city, an immediate inspection of those structures, and in cases where there are no existing structural plans, the delivery of structural plans by the billboard companies to the city so that the city can make sure that those structures are constructed in accordance with those plans and are safe and proper. The last piece of this is a modernization issue, where some of the companies will be allowed to modernize some of their structures. And that is where a policy issue is involved. The status of the litigation is as follows. There were challenges both in state court and federal court. In the federal court, the city has prevailed on all of the federal constitutional claims. What remains open in the federal court is whether or not the program applies to pre-1986 structures. The federal court first said that it does not. The city moved for reconsideration. The federal court then said that it didn't decide that issue, and the billboard companies have now moved for reconsideration of that issue, and that hearing is set for this Monday. In the state court, the city has prevailed on the state constitutional claims. What's left in the state court are the federal constitutional claims and the amount of the fee. And those hearings are set for Monday as well. And if we were to prevail on Monday, that does not mean our fee is valid. It means we would have to go back and enact a new fee based on current estimates, because the fee that was litigated was for 2002 as opposed to 2007.
I appreciate that synopsis for us. Explain what was going on 4 years ago that motivated the government, the city council, to go forward with this process. Were we looking at billboards, too many of them, out of control? What were the issues defined by the council?
Good afternoon, Councilman. Dave Kine with the Department of Building and Safety. As I recall, when this issue was being debated back in 2001, 2002, there was really an outcry from the public in general about billboards throughout the city. There was allegations of illegal billboards being put up. There were in fact billboards being put up without permits in some cases. Others were being altered without permits, and that's what really spurred the whole debate and discussion on this billboard issue, and council ultimately decided to implement this ordinance, which required building and safety to go out and survey the city, locate, catalog, identify these signs, and then regulate them on an ongoing basis on a fee-neutral basis.
Did you do that?
No, we started. The ordinance was passed and approved. We were able to hire all the staff, some 20-plus people, to do the program. We bought all the equipment. We were 1 month into the program when a federal injunction was granted to the billboard companies, which precluded us from continuing that program, and we had to find jobs for these 20-plus people, and we frozen the equipment.
You never got a handle on the billboards out there? How many are legal, how many are illegal, how many are hazardous, or whatever?
We were 30 days into what would have taken us 3 to 4 years to survey the city on.
Right. So right now, we really don't know the dimensions of the issue historically.
We only have approximates, Councilman, on the total number of billboards, but I couldn't tell you, as an example, exactly where they all are, how many are in your district versus another councilman's district.
And what role can the public play at this particular point, who are obviously agitated by the notion of billboards in some areas? I know in my district, many of my constituents are. I know in some of the other districts. What role do they play, if any, at this point?
Well, we're not precluded from doing enforcement. We're still doing enforcement on an as-needed basis. And what I mean by that is we'll receive complaints from the public. If they see that a billboard's being altered in some way, they're adding lights to it, they're doing some kind of modification or building a new one, they can report directly to, they can call 311 and we'll have an inspector out there by the next day or the following day at the very latest, and we will regulate those. But until these settlement agreements are decided, we won't have a citywide survey.
So that's the urgency in getting this done, is to get a citywide survey going, be able to catalog what we have there, and enforce the law.
I think so, yes.
Could I ask the history of some of these settlements? That's public knowledge right now, what we're looking at, what we have settled on?
Yes, Councilman. Sharon Seedorf Cardenas, for the record, City Attorney's Office. There were, as my colleague has stated, there were 4 plaintiffs that brought these lawsuits. The first one was Vista Media. Vista Media can best be described as a company that has the smaller signs. They're normally about 72 square feet in area. They're off-site signs, but they're normally no more than 12 feet tall. That was the first company that came to us and suggested settling this litigation. The council authorized the settlement of that litigation, I believe, about 2 years ago, sometime in 2004. It provided the framework that we then brought forward into the settlement that we brought to the council with the Clear Channel and CBS litigation. All of those settlements that have gone before have had the same kind of pieces to them. I have with me the report of the council's action from, this is the one you did for Clear Channel and CBS, and it was adopted by the council on September 13th, 2006. And the parameters of the settlement are that each company will take down a certain number of signs. The number kind of differed between companies, but basically the percentages were about even between companies. So there was a certain number of takedowns. They would provide the city with all the data they have, either permits or other type data for those signs, when they were built, et cetera. Each company would pay an initial inspection fee of $186 per sign structure, and then there would be a fee for an ongoing inspection. Each company would take down any structures erected on or after 1999
Really?
for which no permit exists. And then each company was allowed to have a certain percentage that they could either modify or alter to be in compliance with city law.
So our closed session will basically be taking a smaller firm that is one of the last yet to go through this process, so we can tighten it all up and then have a policy in place?
Yes, what we are bringing to you today is the final piece of this. It's the Regency company. They have the smallest number of signs. I believe it's around 150 structures, maybe at most 300 sign faces, and it would be basically allowing them to settle along the same terms based on the same percentages and the same ability to enhance or re-permit their structures that were given to the other ones. All the agreements contain a dispute resolution procedure, and all of them are designed to make the program cost neutral for the city of Los Angeles.
And going forward, does this set a baseline that if they want to put up more billboards or they want to put up more signs, they have to go through now a public process that is clear, and they can't get permits issued until they go through this process?
Well, first of all, one of the things the city still has is a ban on the putting up of any brand new billboards. In order to do that, they would have to go through a public process. They would either need to get relief by way of a variance or a significant sign modification, both of which are public processes. This would allow them to keep the signs they have currently in place, and in some cases, update those.
So that kind of grandfathers the history in the past.
It does.
But from our end, going forward, if anybody wants to do more signs or modify things, the public process would be clear enough for all of us so nobody feels this was done in any other way but an open process.
Other than the signs that are covered by the agreements, yes, they would have to go through a public process and follow all the city laws.
Because it sounds like in the past, billboard companies just put them up willy-nilly and didn't even get building and safety's permission.
We do know that to be the fact with the small ones, those ones put up by virtual media. That's what hopefully we will find out when we get the program going.
Very good. Well, thank you all very much for that insight. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam. Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Cardenas is next.
Do we need to go into?
If we were to agree on this settlement, would that preclude us from adjusting the $186 inspection fee or $184 inspection fee, re-inspection fee? Is there a COLA in there? Is there any reevaluation? Because costs go up.
Yeah, Councilman, the settlement itself locks in the fees for the first 3 years and subsequent. However, there is a COLA built into the settlement as well that allows for COLA.
What's it attached to? The COLA.
For the annual inspection. I'm sorry?
Right.
What is it attached to? The CPI? Is it what?
Whatever the COLA is, I'm not sure how that's established. Maybe we could get someone from the CAO's office to help us.
I believe the COLA was attached to the projected increases in salaries as done by the MOUs
Right.
for the employees who are going to do the inspections.
Only
So-
to the salaries. I guess we're low equipment on this inspection. It's really mostly man hours is the vast majority.
In the subsequent years, the equipment is purchased and paid for up front, so we know what that costs.
So basically, we would be agreeing to a closed-end process on what we're going to be charging. We're not giving ourselves the latitude 10 years down the road to reopen that adjustment.
The agreement, excuse me, Sharon Cedar of Cardenas for the record.
Not related, although very fine
true.
individual, not related.
The term of the agreement is only for 6 years. So at that point,
Okay,
the city would be free to, once again, re-examine its costs.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Smith is our next speaker.
Thank you. Since this is an open session, it's not a legal issue, it's just a matter of how you go about doing certain things within the confines of this agreement. If we're talking about Regency, they're required to take down 5 signs, which is 3% of their inventory approximately.
Councilman, the terms of the Regency settlement, although in broad parameters match the other ones,
Right.
have not been negotiated,
Okay.
and that's closed session.
Let me just use issues of how you go about this then. Just from a structural point of view, Company A, whether it's Regency, or let's go back to the one that's already been approved then, the Fox and...
Virtual.
Not virtual, not Vista.
I mean Vista Media.
Clear Channel. Let's take Clear Channel because that's already been decided, it's done, all right?
Right, the council's already adopted.
They have to take down X number of billboards. When they get to X plus 1 to take it down, they would have a credit then that they could use to recite if they get a land use approval for that board. In other words, they're capped at the number of boards. So once they've taken down the number that they're required to take down, the next one after that they would take down, if they took one down and wanted to put it someplace else, they would then have a credit they could use in a land use application? How would that work?
No, this doesn't cap the number, this doesn't say you can only have this many boards. The council has adopted, the city has in place a ban on new signs, new off-site signs. That is still there. Whether they take down the 98 that they bargained for or 200, that is still there. And the only way that they could then put up a brand-new sign would be to comply with the codes, and that would be either through a variance or a significant modification.
Okay.
And those modernizations that would be put up within the same envelope that currently exists. So if there's a 12 by 48 box right now, the new one that they put up would fit in that same box.
Yeah, that's the replacement ones.
Yes.
But as far as anything new, they go through a land use application, and it doesn't matter how many boards they got up. So they have to take down so many, but they can take down as many as they want, but they have to take down at least 98, or in this case, another number.
That's correct.
They have to come down at least that, then anything above that. So if Company A chooses to take down an additional board, that's their choice, that's fine, they can do that. Now, what about property owner John Smith, who has a property with a billboard on it, and he wants to change the company that's there? Besides the contractual issues that he has on his own, if he was to take down the board, have the board removed, can he come back and get a new land use then for that?
Councilman, based on the current ban, we've had the situation since the ban was passed a few years ago. We've had this it's happened in a number of cases. No, they cannot put up a new board. They can't alter the existing board. So if the billboard owner and the property owner have a dispute, or they decide to terminate their lease agreement, and the billboard company decides to take their sign down, that property owner cannot put up a new one.
Barring going through a land use application?
Correct.
All right, so he starts at .0 again. All right, that's what I need to know. Thank you very much.
Mr. Garcetti?
Thank you very much. And it's kind of refreshing, colleagues, to do all this in open session, obviously, in carefully prescribed manner, but it's been an interesting discussion. I just wanted to rise on this because this has been something I've been waiting a long time for, and there's been a lot of media attention kind of beating up on the idea of a settlement when we have to kind of deal with the practical reality that for a lot of our communities, we have a lot of small billboards that are in our residential areas. And the ones that always get the news are the big ones that are out there in areas that we all drive by. But when I drive home in Echo Park, in the Echo Park community, on Echo Park Avenue, right there, I count 15 different face boards that Vista Media, to their credit, whenever I talked to them about taking them down, wanted to take down. We had a settlement. We had a kind of a wrench thrown into that for one of the other companies that was in there, but that company has kind of come to the table now, and we have a settlement that, bottom line, for my community, and literally for that drive home for my neighbors who time and time again wonder why there's homes that then literally have on them a billboard, these houses and these 15 faces in 5 or 6 blocks, we can finally take those down. And because of that, I think it's very important for the beautification advocates, who are our friends, to also know that positive side of things. And that we know that the cost of litigating year after year after year not settling is that for a lot of communities, the blight stays up. And so I'm supportive of this for the reason that, at least in my communities that I represent, a lot of blight's going to come down. We've moved billboards and signage to dynamic areas where people expect it to be, in areas like Hollywood, on the Walk of Fame, and other places where, like in Ginza or Times Square, other places, there's a sense of that excitement and commerce. But we're trying to move it away from those residential areas where it exists right now. So I want to thank Building and Safety and the City Attorney's Office for their work on this, because I know what the difference, as soon as we can settle this, if we do, what it's going to mean to my own neighborhood in Echo Park, what it's going to mean in Silver Lake, Atwater Village, Glassell Park, a lot of the Vista Media signs, which this company, which kind of inherited them, realizes shouldn't be there, are going to do when they take them down. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Mr. Weiss?
Thank you, Madam President. As you all at the table know, I wrote this law, and I've never been terribly fond of these settlements over the years. At the same time, you all have told me consistently over the years that these were the best terms that you could reasonably be expected to obtain, and that the alternative is years and years and years in court. What's your assessment as you sit here now on this settlement?
For the record, Sharon Cedar of Cardenas again. Because this is the last piece of the puzzle to get all of this taken care of, at this point, this is certainly the best terms that we can possibly get. So, yes, I believe it is.
I've seen reports that the city attorney was nonetheless somehow engaged in efforts to obtain modifications, more favorable terms. I don't know if it was either with respect to this settlement or some of the previous ones, but there was some report that there was an effort to go back and tighten some things up. Is that in fact going on? That's what I read. Was that inaccurate?
Council member, I don't know if you recall, but when the Clear Channel and CBS settlement proposal came before the council heard it just before it went into recess, and then continued it to after recess and asked us to go back and talk to them about a few points. We did that. At that time, we reported to you on the results, and that was what went into the settlement that the council approved with those companies. So, no, at this point, we are not looking at renegotiating any of the terms.
And I mean, what do you think would happen if you went back to the table and tried to negotiate down, particularly the elements that concern some of us, which are the number of credits, right, that a billboard company would receive to build a new or modernized sign?
I think that we would prefer discussing that in closed session, Councilman.
I understand that, but you just answered my question a few moments ago. You said you thought this was the best terms we could get.
Right.
So I mean, I think the cat's out of the bag. What can you tell me? Because that's the question I'm being asked: is are these the best terms you can get or not? You tell me.
Well, Councilman, as I indicated, the council had approved a settlement about 2.5 years ago for Vista Media. The percentages are all based upon the same percentages that the council approved at that time. And we have talked to the companies, and they want the same percentages.
Is there anything about this company that is different, that situates it differently, that would give you an opportunity to obtain a better result for the city?
On this particular litigation, we don't believe there is.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to be heard on this item? Mr. City Attorney, you look
Thank you,
ready
Mr.
to say
President.
something.
If council members do not have any questions that could only be resolved in closed session, council could vote on this in open session now, and if so, I would summarize the points of the settlement.
Thank you. All right, we have the settlement before us. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. The settlement before council is Regency would take down 3% of its inventory. Regency would provide the city with addresses for all of its off-site sign structures in the city with copies of all permits in its files. Regency will take down all structures erected in or after 1999 for which no permits can be located. Regency will pay an initial inspection fee of $186 per sign structure to cover the cost of inspection for the first 3 years, plus an additional $184 to cover the cost of inspection for the second 3 years. The city will allow Regency to modernize up to 25% of Regency's inventory. Regency will return each of its sign structures to compliance with previously issued permits. The city will issue permits for signs owned by Regency and erected prior to July 1st, 1986, for which permits cannot be located upon payment of applicable permit fees. The city will issue permits for signs owned by Regency and erected after July 1st, 1986, but prior to 1999, for which permits cannot be located only if such structures could have been lawfully erected at the time of their construction. All disputes under the settlement agreement will be reviewed by the Board of Building and Safety Commissioners with the right to seek judicial review, and Regency will dismiss its state litigation and waive claims for attorney's fees.
Thank you. Okay, let's open the roll on the settlement, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Now, in accordance with California state law, we will go into closed session on the other items that are before us, unless anybody has any objection. We will be back in open session as soon as we finish those matters. Thank you. We're back in open session. Let's take a vote on that last item first.
And that's settlement in the case of Angela Krieg versus City of Los Angeles in the amount of $850,000.
Okay, let's open the roll on the settlement, close the roll, and tabulate the vote. I'm sorry, Mr. Parks, we're doing it in open session. Keep it open and tabulate the vote.
8 ayes, 3 noes.
That is approved. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. We're good. Next item.
Next item is item number 60, and that's settlement in the case of Stanley Mueller versus City of Los Angeles, and that's in the amount of $450,000.
Okay. The Stanley Miller settlement. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That is approved. Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, the vote in closed session on this item was different, so I have to announce it. The vote was 12-0 with Council members Padilla, Reyes, and Wesson absent.
Okay, thank you. And we'll do forthwith on those two settlements, forthwith on 1847, 50 through 57. If there is no objection, we'll send those forthwith to the mayor. Okay. Next order of business.
That clears the desk, Mr. President.
Okay, we had already posted and referred items. Do you have any excuses on the desk?
No.
Okay. Any announcements, colleagues? There'll be time for announcements. The Plum Committee will begin 15 minutes after the adjourning of this meeting. As an FYI, any other announcements? Mr. Labange, you have an announcement? Nope. Okay. Any adjourning motions, colleagues? Does anybody have an adjourning motion today? Mr. Parks, you have an adjourning motion? Okay. Can I ask everybody please to rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask that we adjourn in memory of Owen McGuigan, retired in 1989 after spending 17 years as chief of police for the city of San Carlos. At the time of his retirement, he was one of the longest-serving police chiefs in California. He professionalized that department and brought forth virtually every specialty assignment that is in place today, including canine, traffic, rotational detectives, narcotics. He's fondly remembered as a true leader who cared for his people and the image of his profession. He had served prior to his assignment as chief of police, or his selection as chief of police, at the rank of lieutenant in the West Covina Police Department. Service to be held at 11 a.m. Saturday, December the 2nd, at Green Valley Mortuary at Alexandrite Drive in Rescue, California.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Mr. Labange.
Yeah, thank you, members. A very dear friend of mine, Sister Mary Rose Gonzalez, who was the nun I bought the first loaf of pumpkin bread from over 40-plus years ago, recently passed. She lived to be 90 years old. She was a nun for 73 years at the Monastery of the Angels in Hollywood. Sister Mary Rose Gonzalez.
And Mr. Labange, that was the first loaf you bought. How many have you bought since then?
Oh, I don't know, but
many, many.
They're very beautiful people, and
They
she was
are.
one of them. God bless Sister Mary Rose. And also another angel in our City of Angels, Kay Jamison, recently passed away, was the founder of the Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association, and did a great job in building GLAZA and its support for the Los Angeles Zoo, survived by her husband, Max. I hope we adjourn in her memory.
Thank you. Other adjourning motion? You want to be on that, Mr. Smith?
For me, that meant something to me.
Did you want to be on that? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you motioned to be on it. Okay. Mr. Zine?
I have two, Mr. President. Eli Sherman passed away November 14th. Eli Sherman, 74 years of age, co-founded the Southern California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, spent more than 40 years working for Jewish community centers in Los Angeles. Mr. Sherman was born February 13th, 1932 in Chicago, moved to Boyle Heights when he was 14, became a basketball standout at Roosevelt High School, East Los Angeles College, and Cal State LA. In 1957, he was the first player from the West Coast chosen to play for the U.S. team in the 5th World Maccabee Games in Israel. Mr. Sherman was a longtime physical education director at the Westside Jewish Community Center, having started as a part-time worker in 1955. Also the PE director of the new JCC at Milken of West Hills for almost 10 years. In 1989, he helped establish the Southern California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, an organization that has honored almost 300 Jewish athletes, sportsmen, and sportswomen who distinguished themselves in Southern California. Among the inductees are Sandy Koufax, Sean Green of the Dodgers, Lillian Copeland, who won the gold medal in the discus 1932 Summer Olympics at the Coliseum, then boycotted the 1936 Berlin Games. Eli Sherman was a great man who will be missed by all his friends and family, survived by his wife Beverly Sherman, son Steve, and daughter Sherry. May Eli Sherman rest in peace. And my second adjourning motion is for Patricia Soteris, passed away October 26. Patricia Soteris was born in West Virginia, June 1931, resident of Thousand Oaks. Took over the Agora, Oak Park, Canoga Valley Chamber of Commerce office 7 years ago when the chamber had only 150 members. Now there are over 1,500 members. She gave members personalized attention, and her number one focus was promoting her members. She wrote personal notes, reminders to come to events. She organized all the mixers and breakfast, and had just finished putting on the Chamber's most successful event, the Masry Awards, that recognized community leaders. She is survived by her husband Saul, her son Alex, and daughter Nicole. May Patricia Soteris rest in peace.
Thank you very much. Mr. Zine. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. We will next be in session tomorrow. That is Wednesday, the 29th of November. This meeting is adjourned. Have a great afternoon.